thought I forgot, didn't you? Wow. Thank you. Appreciate that. We're ready. You getting the signal from Charles? Need help?
That's all right, I fell on the floor before.
Okay.
Good morning. Welcome to January 20th Board of Commissioner meetings here in Curry County. If you would please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, do we have any changes to the agenda? Amendments?
I do have some. First of all, under the consent agenda, we would like to add another order for the juvenile department. Basically, we need a transfer order to fill the position. They submitted all the paperwork, but it actually takes a transfer order to move one employee from one department to another.
Okay, so we'll do that as J on the consent agenda.
Okay, and then we also have a rehire order for our building safety division. That is for Hank Eckhart. A personal action form was signed last week to hire him, and it wasn't known at that time that it actually took an order, so I do have an order to add to the agenda under there as well.
Okay, we'll do that as K on the consent agenda.
And then to mess up your numbering there, for the assessor items, which is H and I,
I'm going to pull those.
we're going to pull those because LGPI did not have time to agree to the salary range on that. And for G, appointment of Michael Ling to Planning Commission, South County. That one we're going to pull as well because the planning director had not seen that earlier, and she had some comments on that. So we also have some questions on what to do with the planning commission as we move forward, whether or not it should be combined with our citizen involvement committee or some other matters. So we're going to pull that one as well.
Okay. Anyone else?
Mr. Chair, if I may. 27th meeting, I'd like to request the board approve, I don't know if this needs to be an action item or just consensus, to have the meeting at 3 o'clock on Wednesday the 27th. New Rogue River Siskiyou National Forest Supervisor Merv George will be in town. He'd like to make I've asked him if he would consider making a quick presentation. He also will introduce some of his staff, New Gold Beach Ranger District, who I've met with a couple of times, and better days ahead.
So you're talking the workshop, March 27th or May 27th? Or?
He will be available from about 2:30 on. So I don't know. We still have a regular meeting scheduled.
Is that,
I believe,
February 27th, you know?
yes,
Next week.
that's correct.
And that is scheduled in the evening, wasn't it?
Right, so February 27th, we actually have a meeting scheduled for the evening, and then we also have a workshop scheduled. My understanding is you're not going to be here, Commissioner Posh?
Well, I can be here on the 27th if we do it. One second, let me check my calendar. I just want to make sure on my calendar. I can do the meeting on the 27th if it's late in the afternoon.
Mr. Chair, I didn't know we had a workshop schedule, or I had forgot. So how could we put that together so that we could take advantage of his time and the workshop we already have scheduled?
Well, the meeting
and
is
your schedule.
Where's the meeting? It wasn't here, was it?
Originally, it would have been in Brookings this month, but because of the late scheduling, we decided to keep it here.
Okay. So could we do a workshop at, say, 3 o'clock and a meeting at 5?
We could.
So how long do we expect the workshop possibly to go?
We don't have a lot of items for the workshop. We do, however, have that we would do our first department report at that meeting, and that would be presented by the assessor's office if we decide to continue with that schedule.
We're going to have a workshop to figure out the workshop.
No. Why don't we just go with the workshop at 2 o'clock, and then he can do his presentation?
That would be great. And then he's invited to another meeting with a different citizens downstairs about 5 in the Blue Room. So I think we can make that work. Maybe
No, we
4.
can't. We got a board meeting at 5.
I don't want to miss that. Either one.
Oh, just so you know, though, I won't be able to
Regular
make the
board
workshop
meeting.
until about 3 o'clock.
But he's not here for a workshop. He's here for the regular board meeting, so he can present to the whole county. If we could give him that capacity to offer.
That would be 5 o'clock, though.
Okay, we'll make that work, and then we'll have it. Okay.
So can we do the workshop at 3 then instead of 2?
You could?
Okay.
All right.
We're on target, huh?
All right.
That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other amendments? Okay, can I get a motion?
So move, Mr. Chair.
Second that.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Just, I think executive session is actually on the agenda, and it would be for 192-660 sub 2 sub B to consider discipline of an employee who doesn't request an open hearing, and also 192-660 to, I believe it's H and K, which is to consider information exempt from disclosure, which is legal attorney-client privilege information. So that would be later, probably later in the afternoon, closer to 2 or so.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I believe we have a 2 o'clock meeting. Something scheduled today in this room.
JJ? Is there a 2 o'clock scheduled in this room today?
No. Oh, yes, there is Becky Crockett. The building, the planning director, Becky Crockett, has meeting
Pacific
scheduled here
Reef.
at 2 p.m. in this room.
Okay.
Well, maybe we'll try it at 1 if we can get it at 1.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Actually,
you.
we've had a few things come off, so Mike be able to get through things quicker.
Very good. All right.
Also, on my failure, while we're on this, so can I get a second to the motion?
I'll second that. That's amended with the executive session,
Yes.
right? Okay.
A roll?
Commissioner Gold,
Yes.
Vice Chair Boyce,
Yes.
Chair Pash,
Yes.
motion carried.
Okay, we didn't do a roll call this morning, so Director of Operations Julie Schmelzer is also in the room, as is Council Huddle, and JJ is our main man here. I'm sorry, I forgot to. We just spoke about it, and I forgot to do it. Can you give us? the
Excuse me.
report
Thank
on
you,
the
Mr.
police?
Chair. 2019 Honor Roll of Heroes Law Enforcement Report. So far, for almost the 2 months of 2019, we've lost 18 officers. If we average 9 per month, that would be 108 for 2019, which is 108, of course, too many. But the 2018 total deaths for law enforcement officers in line of duty was 150. So if I may, Mr. Chair, ask for a moment of silence, and we're hoping we can keep these numbers very, very low throughout America. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to start on public comments. We're going to start first with Mary Rowe. Morning, Miss Rowe.
Thank you. Good morning. I am Mary Rowe, and I am here to comment on a consumption or sales tax. First, I would like to say that given the expense of ballot measures, according to our county clerk, our last election cost about $25,000. We need to craft a consumption tax that will pass the first time around if we are even to have such a tax. If we do, would it be possible to have a committee to determine exemptions? If so, it is important that an effort is made to include people who are senior citizens, disabled, low income, and working poor. It is also important to include a social worker who has expertise in analyzing the effects of any tax on various members of the community and on the community as a whole. I am offering to serve on any such committee. There are many advantages to keeping a sales tax simple in terms of what it taxes. It would be easier to set up and administer, and consumers could better understand how it works. I would ask you to please keep in mind that many low-income people are on the edge of not being able to survive and are living without necessities. So, taxing discretionary items rather than necessities is necessary to ensure the survival of all of our people. Taxing luxury items such as alcohol, cigarettes, coffee, candy, jewelry, decorations, etc. would address this issue, and/or taxing restaurant meals. Taxing necessities such as hygiene products, cleaning supplies, pet supplies, medicine, and medical treatments and supplies, sources of heat and shelter should not occur. Taxing grocery store items would hurt our food banks by decreasing the amount of food that people could afford to donate, and also increasing the amount of food that people would need from our food banks. Finally, with respect to sales tax, the poor pay more. What this means is that lower income people pay a larger percentage of their incomes for items that are subject to such a tax. This fact is based on plenty of research. So, sales taxes are discriminatory to poor people unless we in Curry County care enough to craft a sales tax that does not tax necessities. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will say that I've always been a voice that has said that I don't want to burden the taxpayers of this county that have invested their money in property and businesses in this county solely. I think everyone needs to pay everyone that uses the resources of the county should pay the taxes fairly. So we need to find a way that everyone that uses this county, including our visitors, all help contribute to the tax base of the county. All right. We're going to go to Patricia Anderson. Morning, Ms. Anderson.
Morning. I have a handout for all of you. May I give that to you?
Yes, you may.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I preface my concern, excuse me, by saying that I know that in the county it is legal to shoot a gun, as well as something called tannerite, which when hit by a bullet sounds like a bomb exploding. My concern is my service dog, Hank. Every time Mr. Dave Elverud at 28314 Emerald Drive shoots his gun, my service dog, Hank, starts to shake. I am trying to help Hank cope with the gunshots to minimize the effect on him. But when Mr. Elverud shoots at the tannerite, my dog shakes uncontrollably. About 2 weeks ago, Mr. Elverud was shooting and shot at the tannerite. When Hank heard that, he shook controllably for over 1.5 hours. And that's not an exaggeration. That is literally him shaking. His whole body was shaking. If I needed Hank to assist me during that time, he would have been totally useless to me because he couldn't function. I am not the only one affected by this. My neighbor Jo Friesen and her daughter, her husband and dog are also affected by the shooting, as is Mrs. Dawn Rubishki, who has her 82-year-old mother living with her, and there's a note from Mr. and Mrs. Rubishki attached to my note. I have spoken to Mrs. Elverud, whom I might add was not sympathetic about my concerns, and only said they have a right to shoot guns in the county, including shooting at tannerite. At 1 Corinthians 10:23 and 24, it states, all things are lawful, but not all things are advantageous. All things are lawful, but not all things build up. Let each one keep seeking not his own advantage, but that of the other person. Mr. Elverud is seeking his own advantage and is not concerned with, nor is he thinking about the effects this has on his neighbors or his relationship with them. It is my hope that the Commission will change the ordinance that allows for the shooting of tannerite in the county, perhaps stipulating that shooting at tannerite has to be done somewhere other than in an area where people live, such as my neighborhood. It is also my hope that Mr. Elverud would be willing to work something out with his neighbors in regards to the time that he shoots a gun. I have been told by others that even at 10 o'clock at night, he'll be out in his yard shooting his gun. Until then, I will continue to follow the sheriff's dispatcher suggestion and call the 247-3243 number every time Mr. Alvarud is shooting his gun. They told me to call when he is shooting. So thank you for your time, and I appreciate being able to present this before you.
I have a question for you. Has anyone, a group of neighbors, ever gone up to Mr. Alvarud and knocked on his door and said, you know, this is terrorizing our animals. Is there any way we could do this in a more reasonable fashion?
Not as a group. The
Would you have that
reasons are here.
courage?
They have talked, and
Whatever he wants. He has 24 acres there, and he shoots right where the street, where our house is right across the street.
I think,
Shoots right
Yeah.
there. From his house.
You need to come and identify yourself, please.
I'm sorry. I'm Barbara Weedall, and that's my mom, Joe Friesen, and we all live together in the same house. She lives right above us. I have a dog who is a rescue dog who shakes for hours when the tannerite is shot. I myself, it's very disturbing to me. It sounds like a bomb going off. And though it may be legal, it's just not right to allow it right there within a certain, there should be a distance limit for how close to another house or human being he can shoot that stuff.
Well, I'm not
And
sure
we've
that
talked
there's
to
none
him.
on that.
We've talked to him, and he says, well, I can do whatever I want on my property. And I said, but Dave, don't you care about your neighbors and what? Well, I can do whatever I want. It's my property, and I can do whatever I want. That's his attitude.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Boyce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think maybe we need to take a serious look at an ordinance, because that's the very small percentage of gun owners that are irresponsible, and if nothing else, breaking the peace or disturbing the peace is not lawful. Whether he has 24 acres or a half of a square acre, it's not good business. Guns are for self-defense, and boy, I don't know if I'd have the courage to walk up to his door and, you know.
Do we know? Do we know offhand what the setbacks are? Can we get the sheriff's department to find
Just
out what the
research this,
setbacks are
yeah.
for discharging a weapon on property? You know, when you've got another house that's next door. Perhaps we can look at what the setbacks are for that.
I think we should look into it.
Yeah, we'll look into it.
okay, thank you very much. I appreciate
Thank
you
you.
hearing me out.
Ms. Labonte.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
Really early for me. I'm going to read a statement and ask for a response from you. Commissioners, the League of Women Voters of Curry County has taken a position in support of the county's transient logic tax ballot measure based on the following positions. The League of Women Voters of Curry County supports that alternative sources of funding should be explored for county government. The League of Women Voters supports a tax system that recognizes the individual's responsibility for government services by providing a broad sharing of the tax burden. We do recognize that tourists put a certain burden on county government services and facilities, and therefore should share in the tax burden to provide these services. The League has heard concerns the county commissioners may not abide by the distribution of funding provided by the tax as outlined in the ballot measure. Certain percentages are in line with state statutes and cannot be changed. However, we would like the sitting Board of Commissioners to commit to not changing the distribution that is voted on to assure the trust in the county commission on this issue. And I purposely said sitting commissions because we know you can't commit another board, a future board of commissioners. But we feel that in order to pass this tax, we need to hear that the county commissioners are not going to change what's on the ballot, the formula. So we really would like to hear a commitment from you. Thank you.
Well, I've already spoken with you, and I think in my conversation with you, I have said that what was written into the ballot for this Commission should be upheld. We've already guaranteed that, I believe, to the Fair Board and to the police, Sheriff's Department, and as well as the tourism. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm willing to commit to that.
I would commit to that also.
I'm not going to make a promise because I don't know what the future is. I think it would be very unlikely for me not to support that, but until...
Well,
we see
Commissioner
what's gonna-
Boyce, you were one of the ones named that people are concerned that you're going to try to change that formula. And they're very leery about voting on anything that the commissioners might use as, I will use a quote from 1989 or 90, slush fund. That's what happened when the commissioners tried to put away ONC money for the future. A lot of people don't think they wanted to do that. They did. That's when they started the road fund for the future. And they were basically told it would be used as a slush fund, so people did not want them to do that. And that's kind of, we want to make sure that that air is cleared on this, that you're going to commit to what's in that ballot measure, because people aren't going to want to vote on one thing and then have you change it. And I know that at least 2 of you ran on what's the word I'm looking for? You ran for office saying that you didn't want a county manager because people had voted against that. And so you did come in and change that, which was fine. That's what you decided to do. So it's kind of the same thing. If people vote for one thing, we want to make sure that that's what is fulfilled. And as I said, a future sitting board you cannot commit for them. We know that's by law. But we would like to see this sitting Board of Commissioners at least give that TLT the remaining 2 years of your time in office as this board to fulfill it the way the people vote on it. So that's
Thank you. If I may, as a former commissioner, you know the responsibility that goes with that and the trust that the people try and put into our time as a public official, as an elected person. I'm just not willing, if there's concern out there that I'm somehow going to, in some clandestine way, try and figure out a way to maneuver funds, I just don't know what the future is. You mentioned a minute ago that the league supports the research and alternative revenue sources for this county. That's music to my ears. That's the toughest battle that we have here. So not knowing what the future is going to bring for this little county and having our forest burn up and no timber receipts coming in, no option to raise property taxes, in my opinion, not even a consideration, we're faced with some incredibly tough sources, or some incredibly tough choices. And as you said, the TLT percentages are pretty well locked in. So as I started to say there, unlikely I would change or try to change or persuade the board on amending that percentage. But I appreciate very much, and as you being a commissioner 8 years know, even in those days, the funding challenges.
Oh, that's right. We always uphold the vote of the people, though, when I was a commissioner. So,
well, and
so
one more
I will
thing
say
is,
that it looks like the majority of the board won't want to change that formula, so I feel a little more comfortable with it, and I'm sure the legal feels really good about that. So it's just upholding the vote of the people. It's
thank you very much.
important.
And you also mentioned the future board binding another board. Previous board did bind this board on a severance package, as you well know.
Well, that's
So
technically your attorney will tell you
We're
that
good
was not
now.
a legal move. So,
Thank you for letting me respond, Mr. Chair.
thank you.
David Barnes? Okay. I think that's the way the rest of these are. All right, for presentations, Gold Beach, Brookings, Food Banks, and Beyond Rejection Ministries, Commissioner Boyce.
Thank you. Could we have Lila Thorpe come up, please? The last 2 or 3 nights with the amount of need in her assisting people, she has not got a lot of sleep. So I'm just very glad to have her and Jim Johnson here to represent Gold Beach and the incredible efforts you're making. Thank you, Lila.
Well, I'm here by your request to just let the folks know what is going on. And I did give a handout to Mr. Boyce that you can each see. We have a wonderful food bank and have had for a number of years here in Gold Beach at the 3rd Street Seventh-day Adventist Church. It is a community food bank though, because the amount of donations that come in are from the community. We have, as you can see, it goes up and down as far as volunteers, the hours that are put in, the households that come, the people that come. I cannot give you an exact count of the homeless because a lot of times people just write down Gold Beach or Wedderburn. Our soup kitchen that we have every Tuesday night, and now since we've been having such cold weather and stormy weather, I have been opening up so they could come in as a warming center. I have a movie that I show. I feed them dinner. I feed them breakfast before they leave. And I'm open from 6 until about 7:30 in the morning. And I'm hoping that one day we're going to have a center here that can be run for the homeless. I'd even be very happy to work with whoever did it, a home though, that they, not that they can live in, but they can come in as a shelter from the storms and then leave in the morning. And right now we're doing it as a service, a Christian service, and I'm calling it a warming center. I can't really call it a shelter because it's not equipped to be a shelter and to keep people there. But I do want the town to know that there is this available, and any donations or help is always appreciated. And this isn't something that goes to the church. This is a separate thing. The food bank is a separate thing. The soup kitchen is a separate thing. And now the warming center is a separate thing. And it is something that is just going to be done, as to how the money comes in. So.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Like you
Yes.
mentioned donations, and also a quick question. I know it puts a lot of pressure on your church there. I assume you don't have enough volunteers either, generally?
I have a lot of volunteers. They come from many, other churches as well. The Catholic churches has really helped me immensely. Some of our volunteers have died off. Some of them have moved, and so there are times, and people need to get away. People are getting older, the ones that are doing the volunteering, and so they can't put in all the time, or medical reasons they can't be there all the time. And right now, I'm the only one that's represented through the church because I'm the community service center, and I had to go to, I go to Portland every year for training on different things and for disaster through ADRA and all. So, but if there's any other questions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We also have Connie.
Jim Johnson.
Okay, we also have Connie Hunter. And
Nope, Jim Johnson's next.
Okay, I'm sorry. We've got it lined up, okay. Sorry.
Good morning.
Morning.
Jim Johnson. I wear a number of different hats, and so I go down the litany. But Beyond Rejection Ministries is getting ready to go into its 35th birthday coming up in a few months. I was able to put it together prior to my mother passing away in 1987. So as far as back as 1984-85, we were very well established addressing the epidemic of AIDS and creating housing for people that were stranded because of one reason or another, often ignorance, during that period of time, and became homeless, or people living in the rough, as they say, under the other side of the planet. Jim Johnson, I think I got that in there. I forgot what else legally, but I'm right down the street at the old Curry Public Library, and we work very, very closely with anybody that really is addressing the issues of homelessness and impoverishment on whatever level that they're dealing with. I'm really happy today to have Chuck Dwyer here from the Catholic Men's Group. It not only is Chuck and his wife big volunteers for the 3rd Street Food Bank, but they're also very involved as one of the arms that I lean on for transportation. We often have to get somebody out of Curry County and out of Gold Beach and send them as far away as the Midwest and or Portland, south to the Bay Area, into various parts of California, all over the country. And the Catholic Men's Group helps me with a lot of that. Many people that get stranded on the streets or living in their cars and so on and so forth are able to be put up for a night, sometimes 2 or 3 nights, sometimes even a week. And many times the dollars that put them into motels for temporary housing comes from the Catholic Men's Group. And if it was not for that arm, we would not be able to meet the need. There is actually a substantial need. We probably have approximately 3 dozen people living in their vehicles that go 7 miles north, 7 miles south to Pistol River, 7 miles out on the river on the south bank. There's at least in the campgrounds and so on and so forth, and here on the streets, not currently here at the annex. The people that were sleeping down off and on the last year here at the annex at night were coming in about 8 o'clock, leaving about 5:30 in the morning. Most of their phones were set with alarms. They've been asked not to use the annex here as a place, which I had been recommending for a long time. But anyway, it's my understanding that no one's using it, at least this week. So I also wear the hat of the Homeless Coalition, which is now across the street in our neighboring building where mental health was. The Homeless Coalition is trying to address other housing issues. And so those can be, when the time comes, be addressed by myself and or preferably one of the executive members of the Homeless Coalition, probably Beth Hidalgo, would be the best to speak for the sake of the Homeless Coalition. We do a lot of other things. So far this winter, I think we've passed out at least 2.5 dozen brand new sleeping bags. We were blessed this year to be able to obtain 5 degrees Celsius, 15 degree Fahrenheit sleeping bags, and we were able to send people all over the state and south because of the generosity of the people who helped finance all that. And when the food bank is closed and when the soup kitchen's closed and not available and so on and so forth, people come to the front door of the old library and can get food during the course of the rest of the week. And we'll leave it at that. I don't want to talk any longer. I didn't intend to talk this long, but if there's any questions that I can answer for anybody, I'd be love to.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Johnson, you mentioned the Catholic Men's Ministry supporting you financially and the efforts, but I also know you've put money many times out of your own pocket. And if I may, not to embarrass you, but that store that you have at the old Gold Beach Curry Public Library has got to be one of the most fascinating, I don't want to say just antique shop, but it's just maybe on the entire Oregon coast. So I'm just going to put in a little plug there because, again, I know a good portion of that goes to helping people come through the community, and you're just greatly appreciated.
Yeah, and very, very welcome. You know, my brother had passed away. In a couple weeks, it'll be 10 years, and one of the last things that he asked me to do was to liquidate the family assets, to put it into the charitable works that the family was involved with. My mother's father, grandfather, and great-grandfather, my great-great-grandfather, were all very, very instrumental in Joplin, Missouri, and other places in the Midwest where their farms were, and so on and so forth. And that's what they did, was they tried to build, and they worked with employment. They also tried to create jobs. That was a big thing to Mom, was creating jobs for people. And on that note, I want to mention this last year, the average person, homeless person or transient traveler coming through has been males in their 30s, and they're not drug users, and they're not alcoholics. They are just simply coming here. They want to work, and a lot of them are veterans, and they are coming from other parts of the country, and they want. We've got last night at least 3 current ones going through town. They'll be gone within the next probably 48 to 72 hours because they're going to head north looking for more work. But I just want to mention those because it's become the more common homeless person that comes and/or traveler that comes through Curry.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next.
Connie Hunter, Pam Weinbarger. One of you has to go first. Ms. Weinbarger, you might want to, that mic on the right, you might want to tug that down just a little bit. Thank you very much.
First of all, thank you for having us. Commissioner Pash, Commissioner Boyce, Commissioner Gold, and of course, Director Julie. It means the world for us to feel like our work is respected and appreciated, besides needed. So I'm going to hand out a few things real quick that'll help me go through my presentation. And I want to make sure that everybody knows this is Pam Weinbarger. She's our Executive Director from Brookings Harbor's Community Helpers Food Bank, and a total asset to our community.
Are you the soft-spoken one?
Not really.
I
just,
She's not afraid of much.
She
they had
runs
to
a
twist
program.
my arm to get here today because I am one busy person, but that's just the way it goes.
And we have to say thank you to our local media for helping us get the information out. So if it wasn't for some of the front page storages that are in the pilot and other media like the radio stations Curry, KCRE, and KPOD, some of the crises that we've had to deal with wouldn't have come to the forefront, and people wouldn't have been able to come forward and be as generous as they are. For example, the recent shutdown of the government, we had an influx and an increase of people using the food banks because of delayed paychecks. We also made sure that we got the information out on behalf of the Elks Lodge and their efforts to make sure that our local Coast Guard had food and income. They provided, the public was asked to provide cards so that they could go right down to Freddy's and use those gift cards. So the food bank, even though we are
feeding a huge, incredible amount of people, and you'll see that in the statistical information. The white sheet that says Food Bank Statistics 2018, you'll have a pretty good idea of what we do, and I'll go through some of those real quick. But we do other things. We make sure that every once in a while, if there's a cold snap, we stepped up and helped with getting sleeping bags and warm clothes one year. When the Checo Bar fire happened, we all know the heroes and sheroes of the food bank that were breathing that smoke and unloading and reloading and packing hundreds of thousands of pounds of food and going from feeding 200 people a day to closer to 2,500 people a day sometimes. But the point is, we somehow rise to the occasion, and the only way that we can do it is through partnerships, through community coming forward and being generous, the hard work and increased skills not only of our board but of our staff members has helped us be more capable in our fundraising, and that's the only way we can meet the need. So having us here today, if one person hears about the need of our food bank and our need for volunteers and board members and comes forward, we will have hit a home run. So I appreciate the public awareness opportunity today. In 2018, 83 food boxes per week on average. Now those food boxes, when they're given out, they're not given generally just to one person. It goes to families, and families can be all shapes, sizes, as you know. So 83 boxes of food per week could be feeding, 6 times 83 people. So we don't have a total number of people that we serve with the food boxes, but we do have a huge annual total of over 4,000 food boxes just in 2019. Of course, we supplement that with our daily counter, which in 2018, over 11,000 people were served at daily counter meals. And a lot of times those are our veterans and our seniors, and they come in for that daily amount of food. And then when we're talking about feeding people, the hearts of gold that have already spoken and the people that will speak and our hearts, we reach out to our young people too. We realize that we have to make sure our young people in school have supplemental food program, and we call that the snack pack program. We've increased the size of that snack pack program significantly. It'll be even larger in 2019, but in 2018 we served over 8,400 snack packs, but those snack packs don't feed one student. We make sure that there's enough in those snack packs. If they go home and they have siblings, those siblings get fed too. We've been able to, over the last 3 years, continually, gradually increase our fundraising capabilities. You'll see on the back of that blue handout that I gave you, it'll say the Brookings City Council presentation. Well, we didn't change the title. We forgot to. We were having our meeting in preparation of this, and we had 2 new clients come in the middle of our meeting. So we stop our meeting, go... Pam would work with the client, then we go back to our meeting, and then the last person that came in and not to interrupt our meeting, but we navigated was a veteran coming in for the first time to receive services from the food bank. So please pretend that says the
You're forgiven,
Curry County Food Bank. You can forgive us.
It's all one
right.
big family.
Thank you, Commissioner Pash. But our budget for our budget goals for fiscal year 2019 are lofty because it includes a capital campaign. We're talking about $345,000 that we're hoping to raise. We're going to have to cover our expenses, which are estimated at about $153,000, and so that is in our fundraising goal to cover that expense. And then our $30,000 projected total expense for the snack pack program. Good news is Pam's already written a grant and gotten $10,000 of that. So we have about $20,000 still left to raise there, but it has to be included as, our fundraising goal. $162,000 is what we're looking at for a projected, and it's kind of out of our normal budget for a storage solutions campaign. And I'm not going to talk much about that because Pam has the scoop on that. But if we wanted to sit down and give a value to our volunteers, the independent sector, which is a fantastic publication that supports and pulls together information about nonprofits nationally, actually figures a volunteer value. Now for national, it's $24.69 an hour that volunteers are valued at. In Oregon, because of our volunteers are valued at $24.89 an hour. So if you cost it out, all of and it's over 4,481 hours is what we have there. We actually didn't include some of our board numbers, and next year we will. If you cost that out, our volunteer value was $101,532.09, and they're worth that and more. So thank you, volunteers. And I'm going to be quiet and let you talk to Pam. She's got more important things to say.
Commissioner Gold has a question.
I just have one question. I notice when I go to the Freddy's every time, they ask to round up to the nearest dollar to give to the food bank. How are you doing on that?
We have not gotten that check yet, but we do every year. And sometimes it's as much as $8,000 to $10,000.
So is it for a month? Is it for a year? How long is that?
It just depends on how they run it. We don't really, I don't set that for them. It's not something that we are involved in. We just simply get the check.
Okay.
And so as soon as as soon as they get done with that, they pull it and give us a check. But they do have, some food banks may know this, but they do have a program where you can give a number to everyday shoppers at Freddy's. And they can go in with that number and say, I want you to credit that to the 3rd Street Food Bank or the Brookings, like rewards. And we get a check on average about $106 per month from that. And so that helps. That buys a little food.
Yeah, I just thought I'd mention that because every time I go through the line, they always ask. So
and it does come to us, so thank you.
That adds up, I know.
Absolutely. Thank you, Commissioners, for inviting me today. My name is Pamela Weinberger, and I'm the Executive Director for the Brookings Harbor Food Bank, also called the Brookings Harbor Community Helpers. I've been with the food bank since 2017. I came in just before the Chetco Bar fire, and actually my board was always calling me and talking to me and say, are you going to quit? Are you going to quit? Because the Chetco Bar fire was huge for us, and it was my very first emergency in that respect. So, I during the Chetco Bar fire and after the Chetco Bar fire, we identified that one problem that we have was storage. If it wasn't for Bernie Bishop bringing us a U-Haul truck that he uses on his for his business, we would have had nowhere to put food. Literally, that 17-foot truck was filled to the top and to the end with canned food from our community, and what a wonderful thing that was. But because of that, we have identified that we just don't have enough storage. And so we started a project. It's called our Storage Solution Capital Campaign for 2019. It's on the back of your packet. And that is project is about $165,000. We've started that project. We had to take out a tree, which was a maple tree. It was a beautiful tree. We tried to give it away. Nobody wanted it. But it was near a water line, so people were afraid to pull it. But anyways, we got it pulled out. We had a greenhouse that was not functioning that they have pulled down. And so what we're hoping to do, and what our lineup is the phase 1, writing the grants, which Connie and I are currently in the process of doing some project planning, and then phase 1.5 was removing that greenhouse and the plants, and then getting bids for concrete pads or even asphalt. What is it? I know the name of it, and that just kind of left me. Oregon Food Bank has said that they would find a storage container for us. So we're looking for an 8 by 20 foot storage container to bring onto the property.
We have not lost hope that somewhere in the county we will find a place to build a new food bank because we need one. As you see with our numbers, and I know Connie got ahead of herself in some of those, I want to go over just a few of those numbers so that you kind of know what happened with the food bank. In 2018, we did serve over 4,200 people with boxes. Of those 4,200 people, that equal to 12,978 people that we serviced in the county. Now, you know, for in Brookings and Harbor, there's not that many people. And so that means a lot of those times that we're duplicating those services to people every month. Our daily counter, a lot of people think it's just for our homeless. It is not for our homeless. It is for our seniors. It is for our vets. It's for our working poor, the people that are struggling just to eat. We have one young man that comes in and he gets food for the day just so he can go to work because he has not enough food in his household, and he's a household of one, but we provide a protein and a breakfast cereal and a couple of granola bars and water and bread or whatever we have of extra that's over to those people, and that's over 11,000 people in 2018. Now in 2017, we do snack packs, and we've done snack packs for about 4 years. 2017, we had 3,900 snack packs that we gave to children. That's a lot of snack packs. Last year, we did over 8,400. That's almost a triple in the amount of kids that we're giving snack packs to. And we know that there is probably 30% of our children that have food insecurities in our school. But let me tell you a simple story. Last year in February, the school person that does their extended day program approached me and she said, Pam, can you guys provide snacks to our kids? We want to kind of get our kids to come in. And these are kids that, because of Proposition 96, have to stay after school because they're failing. Okay? And I said, well, how many kids do you have in that program? She said, 22. I said, not a problem. I'll provide it for you. Within 3 weeks, we had 150 kids come into that program per week. Now we service over 690 kids in that program. Now, a lot of those kids are duplicates every single day. But now she has kids that are coming to her because they come to school and they haven't eaten since 6 o'clock the night before, and they're hungry and they can't concentrate. And so they're asking her, do you have a granola bar or something? So we're giving more snacks. And so this represents the 8,400 kids and the snacks, not the kids, but the snacks that we're providing to these kids. And now we've put in something else with them. I said, you know what? We're going to make a difference with these children. If these children are hungry, we're going to send them a snack pack like we do at our food bank. We're going to send them home with a snack pack. And so that's what we've done. Now we provide 50 snack packs a week to that school program. And they're called double snack packs, so there's enough food for them to share with their brother or sister, and makes a difference for them. So the Oregon Food Bank is going to help us provide a storage container, and that we will be better prepared for our emergency preparedness. We're getting ready to make sure that we have what we need. We need site preparation for the storage container. We need to build out with the shelves and cooling, all those kind of things. And of course, it's my job to write grants and to make the public aware of what's going on. So we're going to be able to hopefully raise a significant amount of money, over $160,000, so that we can do this. But what I'd like to present to you and to the community is we could really use some in-kind donations. Somebody that knows how to, I don't know, maybe pour asphalt. Maybe they have a company that they would be able to be willing to make a driveway or make an asphalt driveway or a concrete pad or whatever to help us out, to help us with construction. We need a small little shed to put our trash cans in because sometimes people like to dump their trash. And then we only have one trash can. And so they like to put their trash in our trash can, and so then we don't have enough room for all of ours. Because whenever we get food in, there are some food that is expired, we have to throw that away. So we have to throw that away in our trash can anyways. But I'm just hoping that between what we're making the community aware of and everything, that we can do our best to do what our mission is, and that is no one goes hungry. And I just thank you for giving me this time to be able to speak with you today, and I hope that our county can make a difference, because I know our food banks are. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one thing to say.
Okay.
And this is to everyone out there that donates their time, their finances, their money to organizations. I'd like to just say thank you very much. To all of you for what you do.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I might give you a lead on something.
Okay.
And I don't want to put anyone on a hot seat, but I do know that Tidewater and Freeman both sometimes have a load that goes out that gets recalled for a reason. If you could get the forms built for that from someone in kind, if you contacted those companies, they sometimes also will donate their service to come in and pour 3, 4, 5, 10 yards, whatever it is. They might easily donate the concrete or something like that. So that's someone you might want to reach out to.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. We know you're growing out of your present facility, so maybe we'll be able to take a roll down the road and help you find a location.
Absolutely.
And I'm amazed the time you got here, as you mentioned, just prior to the fire, and the intensity of that whole thing, and the thousands of people you helped, and not just moving food, but moving a lot of water. And so I hope that this generates interest from more volunteers and donations.
Absolutely.
For all three of our county locations.
Yes,
thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Ms. Loshbaugh, will you want to bring your friend Mary up? Come on, Mary.
I would like to put on a little video if I could get some help from the gentleman.
I think I have the mouse here.
Okay, thank you. And thank you so much for inviting us to be here today. It's great. Anytime we get to talk about us, we love it.
We do.
Our little community.
Yes.
I didn't. I don't even know how to do it, Mr. Boyce.
Put it on the table, or put it on
Set
the
it down on the
podium,
table.
Sit on
and
there.
move it around.
And where are we?
I don't see, there it is
I don't
on
even-
top, there you are.
Yeah.
Oh, there
Yep,
you
slow
go.
down.
I was there.
You gotta go real
Thank
slow
you.
with that
Oh,
one.
there he is.
That's who I was looking
Yeah.
So you have to go really slow.
Okay.
There you go. Thank you. Thank you.
Guess you could say I'm a refugee of sorts. Not the kind you normally read about. Fleeing conflict and violence, but one that is more unique to America these days than anybody readily wants to admit. Health issues ended my employment in California, and with it the
Whoops. Here he comes.
Maybe it's buffering. Not sure. Internet around here, right?
Yeah. Right. That's our garden out there that we have, that we grow fresh fruits and vegetables.
Guess you could say I'm a refugee of sorts. Not the kind you normally read about. Fleeing conflict and violence, but one that is more unique to America these days than anybody readily wants to admit. Health issues ended my employment in California, and with it the first affordable health insurance I'd had in 15 years. As they say, it was time to get the hell out of Dodge, or purgatory as the case may be. Turned out this town I stumbled upon is full of people who had to get the hell out of somewhere.
We seem to have an ever-growing homeless population.
So I started something new for monthly education.
I was in denial about being homeless for a while. Not like I didn't know what was happening, but it's like it wasn't really real.
I'm grateful that I have a place to live right now, however, it's not sheltered completely.
I never thought in a million years that I would actually need a place like Common Good. And then I found myself in that situation where if I don't have Common Good, I wouldn't survive, basically.
I'm sure that's getting heavy. Thank you very much.
This community has a lot of need. Our children are in need, and we try to fulfill some of those needs. We can't fulfill them all.
1 in 4 working families are accessing our food pantries. 1 in 4 kids are living in poverty. 1 in 4 kids are showing up to school hungry.
People do seem to feel like they're responsible for their brothers, and they really feel like if they have something, they need to share it with those who don't.
We're all volunteers, nobody gets paid.
We got 30 of these.
We're spending an awful lot of time and a lot of energy and a considerable amount of fun, but I see it paying off. It's slow, but it's paying off.
I think we're a compassionate community, and we try to be. This is one of the most beautiful places in the world to live.
I think the food bank is doing everything that they can do. I think they do an amazing job, but I don't think the food bank in a small community that's only open one day a week is enough.
So in some ways we're back to feeling a bit of angst over what the future may hold, more accurately what it may deny. But I'm going to stick around. It's been a positive experiment of sorts for me, a community that for the most part acts like one.
We don't have sophisticated government-run social institutions or things. We just have people that like to help people. Feel good about it.
That's kind of a little overview of who we are, but I'm really proud to be part of this community that pulls together. What we want to talk about today is the insecurity. In the last 2 years, we've gone from serving 200 boxes a month to people to over 450 now. And it's been in just such a short amount of time. Our town has 1,100 people in it, and we're giving out 450 boxes of food a month. And what Brookings said is so true. We've never done this before, but we have the high school coming to us and saying the kids are hungry, they're falling asleep in class, can you help us out? And we're sending everything we can up there. And they're eating the cereal, they're having anything healthy we can get. We pull up fruit, and the cereal we always try to have, but it just amazes me how much the more we try, the bigger the need is, and it doesn't seem like we're keeping ahead of it, and we're trying, but it's not. And I hear you asking for people to help. We're so fortunate that Rotary came in when we wanted to do that garden. All we said was we'd really like to grow our own food, and there they were with the rototiller, and the church said that we could use their backyard, and we had that, and now we have our greenhouse the same way. We're very fortunate in Port Orford that if we ask, it comes. And the same has happened with our food when we've been totally out of food. There have been days that our pantry manager was pictured in there. She passed away this week. And I remember her biggest fear was that we wouldn't have any food when people came. And we've come really close to that before. And what always happens, and her favorite story was we had nothing. I mean, we were just empty and people kept coming. And Carnahan Chickens up Langlois came and brought us 50 dozen eggs. Just brought it in, and somebody else brought their garden stuff, and we're chasing people down the road. We have food now, we have food. And so the community is really blessed, but that steady funding stream is, even though we're all volunteer, we still have to pay rent, and we still have to pay for the food, but we appreciate this county.
$500 a month for water for the garden in the summertime.
Yeah,
in the city.
Yeah.
That's hard.
I mean, expenses are high. They really are. But we appreciate this county. And thank you for letting us come talk. And just thank you for being there. Please keep in mind that in Port Orford, we're about to lose our Meals on Wheels. And the Common Good has been asked to take that over. And I don't know that we have the funds for it. We've checked into insurance, and I'm not sure we can. And we need that Meals on Wheels program. We desperately need the Meals on Wheels. And Langlois has lost their food bank. So now we'll be getting those people too. But thankfully we all work together, and thank you so much for...
Stay up there for a second. Yes, if I may. Yeah, I felt it was easy to get hold of you and Connie and Pam and Jim and Lila. Struck out unfortunately at Langlois.
They're gone.
Yeah. But to have you here and the other 4 guests that just spoke, I would challenge the community. If there's any master gardeners out there, is there any in the audience? Master gardeners? OSU?
I
only one?
I really need to add that OSU has been amazing.
Yes.
They come and they use whatever weird food that we have, and they'll make up recipes with it and feed our people as they come in and wait in line and pass out the recipes so that they know how to use kohlrabi and lentils to make a really nice meal for their family. So we do have local people that come in, and that garden has been such a blessing. But volunteers, always volunteers, and as I just said, we lost our
I have
pantry manager.
a good friend that reminded me the other day, said, health, he's in his late 50s, says, non-packaged, or excuse me, non-labeled foods. And so we're working on some of our county properties that might be adequate for community gardens. I mean,
That would
fencing
be
with the deer we
amazing.
have here is always an issue, but just having you all here today, I think, opens up some really good doors for pulling the county together. You understanding Brookings' challenges back and forth, Gold Beach. And if anybody that's listening wants to get in touch with any of you, they can do it through staff Jesuit, our office, and
Thank you.
we just really appreciate on short notice you coming and contributing. Nice movie. I'm going to see that again. Wonderful
It's going to be a
job.
longer version soon.
Maybe we'll be able to help. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. And as I'm walking back, I want to say that Valley Flora has been amazing too. You know, if you
Who's
spend
that
the
again?
big bucks on Valley Flora and their nice organic produce, we get that every week.
Yeah.
They're just amazing. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Well, I think what we need to do is, by law, we have to take a 15-minute recess. So before we move on to the presentation on the tax proposal, why don't we take 15 minutes real quick, and we'll be back.
Land trade. You're familiar with the land trade?
Yes. Well, brush.
Yes. Anyway, we'd love to see
Okay.
that.
Okay, that would be another one that, you know, hopefully I can work on. I got my name and what the number down.
All right.
Click OK when I comes up. Me? Which one's okay? Click the OK button is what he's saying. Right there.
Not going to be much help, John. It did come up. I got four of the same
That's
thing.
okay.
and-
I mean, I've got all my notes, so.
Thank you.
And it's going to be pretty condensed. So.
Do you need something up there?
I don't know.
I don't think it's
I'm not sure
available.
if to my knowledge, I don't have anything up here, but John knows for sure.
Well, you can,
I don't know.
depends on what he has. Oh, I'm fine just for the oral.
Okay.
Yeah, but thank you, Charles.
All right. We're going to come back into order. Next on our presentations is Curry Consumption Tax Proposal. John Hitt.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, my name is John Hitt. Actually, I'm later on the agenda too, under 6B, under Personal Services Agreement, to provide planning support, consulting services, as well as other services as directed by you as the Board of Commissioners and by Julie Schmelzer. Before I forget, I would like to ask Mr. Chairman, with your permission, to be able to come back and make just a couple of comments on agenda item 6B when we get there. But right now, I would like to present to you a discussion, really. What it says in the agenda is a proposal. I think that's premature at this point. What I would like to do just simply is give an overview, like the 30,000, maybe it's a 50,000 foot view of consumption tax, experience of other communities, and some of the things that we might consider if you all decide to move forward. And I do want to respect your time. I know you have a very busy agenda, so I'll have to move through this quite quickly. First, I would like to point out a year ago, or not quite a year ago, I made a presentation about the overall county financial status and how it has changed over the years. Curry County for many years has faced declining revenues in the face of increased expenses. So leaving the Curry County with a situation, at least in my opinion, that the status quo is not an acceptable option. Status quo means we'll continue to experience declining revenues and increasing expenses. And at some point, we're probably really pretty much at that point right now, those two cross and you start to get further and further behind. So what are the options to address that? Well, there are many, some of which have been discussed here before, but one of the ones I want to just focus on right now is the consumption tax proposal. And there are at least two, there are actually many communities that have a consumption tax, but I would like to just point out two of them real briefly. City of Ashland has a 5% consumption tax, falling primarily on prepared foods and beverages, and that in turn has some exemptions. And the City of Ashland generates roughly $3 million per year off of that tax. I might add, just as a sidebar, since you have a TLT or TOT, transient occupancy tax, on the agenda, Ashland City alone, that's not counting the state or the county TOT, but Ashland alone collects 10% and at $5.8 million per year in revenue. I took a look at a county out of state, which sounds a little bit odd, but Pacific County, Oregon, which lies just over the Columbia River on the Pacific coast, kind of a very similar county in many ways to Curry County, roughly the same population, heavily tourism-dependent economy like ours, along with fishing and forestry, and also geographically fairly isolated from the I-5 corridor, as are we. Pacific County imposes a 1.5%, so a much lower rate than Ashland, but on a much broader tax base. And I will take the time to tell you what that tax falls on and what's exempted. But I'll let you know that Pacific County, at that 1.5% consumption tax rate, generates $1.7 million per year. Curry County has total taxable sales, retail sales, based on a reasonable projection from the 2012 economic census of roughly $300 million a year. What are some of the exemptions out of that? Because very few entities, in my experience, my knowledge, have a total across-the-board tax on all retail sales. Almost everyone that does that, whether it's at the state level, county level, or local level, exempts certain things. Some of the most common are food, pharmaceuticals, and many other particulars. You just heard a few minutes ago the testimony from Mary Rowe, and I agree with her. This is not a tax where one size fits all, i.e. what works in Ashland may or may not work here. What works in Pacific County or other locations in Washington or Oregon may or may not be appropriate for us. And it is something that needs careful weighing and consideration as to what should be taxed and what should be exempt, and what should be the rate of that tax. Is it 1.5? Is it 1? Is it 5? Or some other number? And how is that tax best and most fairly collected? And so I think that is something that needs careful review and consideration, and would ask that you maybe consider appointing an ad hoc committee to take a look at that. If you want to proceed at all, if you choose to proceed and further consider this matter, an ad hoc committee that I could work with, or some other staff person could work with, and figure out what is the size that is going to be the best fit for Curry County. Now, Mary Rowe did say, I think Mary's gone, unfortunately, but Mary did say something that totally shocked me when she proposed a tax on coffee. I mean, that's just like Twilight. No, I'm joking. Although I really do love my coffee. But if you factor out most of the exemptions, or the typical exemptions that other counties and cities do for consumption tax, we would probably end up with a net taxable base of somewhere around $250 million. You can see then that a 1.5%, if we were to be more like Pacific County, would generate something in the order of $2.3 million per year. Now, I think one of the things, and Mary touched on this, as you commissioners yourselves have touched on this, and that is we need to focus on specific uses for these funds. In my experience in various tax revenues proposals in actually 3 states, Oregon, Washington, and California, the taxpayers want to see a firm commitment for their money to go to certain things that will be a clear public benefit. So I would certainly recommend that be the case here. Some of the possible and I think attractive uses for these funds would be public safety, the South County Emergency Room, emergency communications here. You've all been well discussed and are aware of the fact that our emergency communication system is teetering on the edge of the cliff. So if we're not to have a disastrous failure where everybody goes dark, we need to do action very quickly. And that's not a cheap or quick fix. Visitor promotions, another good use of that. I mentioned Pacific County, their tax, they allocate of that tax, they collect almost $400,000 a year for visitor promotion, just at the county level. County parks, repay the road fund, borrowing from the road fund, economic development and housing. We've all seen the acute housing need here in Curry County. Public water systems improvement, and then a tiny percentage, 4 or 5%, something in that range, for tax administration costs. So I know you're also considering an advisory ballot on this matter, and however you wish to proceed, again, I would just conclude by recommending that we get more public input on how to really tailor this type of tax to generate the level of income that the county needs from these various particular projects and needs, or others that might be added or taken away, and so that it falls in the most fair and reasonable way on the average Curry County citizen. Keeping in mind, again, in our case, much of that tax, probably a third, maybe more than that, depending how the tax is structured, would actually fall on people coming into Curry County from the outside, visitors and others. And as was pointed out also earlier, that's a reasonable, by Lucy Lamont, that's a reasonable need. Those visitors, those guests to the Curry County, well, we love to have them, they promote business, but there's also resources that need to be allocated to those visitors. So we want to have a tax, again, that appropriately is shared by those visitors and not an undue or unfair burden to our residents. So that conclude my remarks and answer any questions you may have at this time.
Commissioner Gold?
I was looking at the possible advisory thing to go on the ballot, and one of the things on there was real estate, a consumption tax on real estate in excess of $100,000. So just getting this morning, I did a little quick research and found out that the average home in all of Curry County is $313,000, $313.4 thousand. And these are hot off the press.
Right. Well, I think you raise a good point, Commissioner Gold, and that relates to the fact that more study needs to be done as to if this tax is imposed on real estate transactions. So that's one question. Should it be? And the second question, if we answer that, or our advisory group says yes, or you decide yes, then how should that tax be levied? So
Yeah,
do you exempt 100,000? Do you exempt 200,000? Do you exempt even 300? What was your number? 350 something?
Well, it was 313.4, and that's all of Curry County.
Right.
I got into all of the others, you know, the Brookings area and so
Right,
forth, but I
right.
just came up with an average, and if you just looked at 1.5% tax, that would be an average of 2838 extra.
Per sale.
Yeah, per sale, and 2% would be 3784. That's with the exemption of 100,000. So I think these are some important considerations, and
They
I
are.
would hesitate
They are.
to put this on the ballot in May without really having studied it. Because I just got this thing this morning, and I'm thinking, not a good idea just to shove it through.
Council Huddle.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And so one of the elements that I heard about the presentation or saw in the materials was a tax on the transfer of real property. There is a statute that says local governments can't do that. It's 306-815. I'm working with the Association of Oregon Counties. Because this would only be a advisory question, we may be able to use the information to tell the legislature, you know, the people of the counties would like this. So because it's just an advisory question, I just want to let the board know that there could be bumps in the road on that particular part of this issue in the future, but as an advisory question, we could just use the information to tell the state, you know, that tax.
Yeah, I've never heard of a real estate tax, even in California. I lived there for quite some time. So.
Washington State does collect that.
Do they?
Yeah,
Okay.
and I forget the percent. I think it's like 2.
Is that
But in California, when you sell your home, it's reassessed at the sale price, and that's what your tax becomes, and that's not happening in
that's
Oregon.
true, because of Jarvis.
So those are things that we can look at as well, as when people come up here to buy property, maybe we reassess the property, maybe with some exempt part of it, but the property gets properly reassessed at the value of the property is what you're willing to pay for it.
So it does say that the prohibition doesn't apply to a tax adopted under 203, and I think it says 815, but let me see. And
I hope you're not wrong on that, I'll tell you.
In what way? Talk to me. What are you saying?
I'm just kidding. I'm being facetious.
Okay. I just have to see, because the 203 chapter is our local self-governance chapter, but that might be a home rule section, which we're not. So, like I said, a work in progress on that. So we'll just have to keep in mind that there could be bumps on that. But taking a survey of the county citizens isn't precluded by any prohibition.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, hey, thanks for great work, especially the research and the other state there, Washington, you mentioned. Fascinating. The one county you mentioned was able to pay out $300,000, if I understood correctly, towards visitor promotion.
Yeah, almost 400,000.
Almost 400.
Yep.
So we have our shoppers coming over from the border, and at 2%, they would still save almost 5%. And what we might...
It's high in California.
Yeah. I don't feel like getting a sense from the voters on a very basic plan is ramming it through in May. I very much appreciate and would love to have you participate in, as you said, ad hoc committee, that recommendation. I think that would be premature, though, until we see how this vote went, and you have mentioned that prior. In the vote, you've mentioned also, Mr. Hitt, that our spending is going up and our revenue is coming down. I'm not sure about that. I know that we've had some wasted spending the last couple of years. It's just deplorable. And so, no, nothing like this is going to pass until we get the trust of the citizens that we're going to get spending under some discipline and control. But if we listed, one you didn't mention was the harbor water, 5%, and then the Port Orford and Langless water projects. Or did you?
I included those both into public water system improvements.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
But there's 3 communities that really need help. We're not going to get it through forest receipts. We're not going to get it through raised property taxes. I think you said, reminded us that a third of the funds would come from both or combined tourism A and B, which is over the California-Oregon border, in addition to visitor destination. For 2 years, I've been promoting the review of this, and it's been an uphill battle. And we finally, because both in April and in 17 and in October of 17, I tried to come up with a consumption tax advisory committee we called CTAC, and we had a lot of the work done in 2012, and I got shot down on that twice. During that time, I haven't heard any other possible options from anyone in the county other than the TLT tax, and I'm going to be vigorously supporting that. But it's not a lot of money that we can count on, even for law enforcement. So I want to go over what I heard you say again on, and I would assume this would be in the ballot. That would certainly be my preference. But public safety, South County Emergency Room, the new countywide communication microwave system and replacement, visitor promotion. No, the first 3 are 15%, visitor promotion at 10, county parks development 10%. That adds to our whole visitor mystique, I think. Repay the road fund reserves, I think you said up to 5 previous years, 10% of that $3 million that we'd be collecting. I think that is that's a pretty lofty goal, but I think it's something we really have to make an effort toward. And then again, the harbor, water, and Port Orford Langless, and then, 10%, economic development and housing. I mean, when you look at the problems we have with sudden oak death, with the housing, the loss in tourism due to the fires in 2 consecutive years, I challenge anyone to find a better possible option than this. And so I'd like to, Mr. Chair, to the extent that we can refine this in the next few days and in a very broad concept, see if the voters, based on what we prioritize as the spending for this county and the emergency holes that we need to fill as soon as possible, I'd like to see it go before the voters and see if it even, after May, we may say no, or we may say, yeah, we're back to our committee. Let's come up with a really refined plan that we can offer the public and go from there. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just being mindful of time, we are going to be up against a time crunch if we're going to have another meeting in this room at 2 o'clock. So I would ask for somewhat brevity in some of the comments here. It would be appreciated. Mr. Barnes?
Thank you very much. I'm David Barnes. I don't know if I've gone on record before, but I will now. I'm highly opposed to a consumption tax. Consumption taxes are regressive. They disproportionately affect the poor and the working poor and the senior citizens who comprise about 75% of our population in Curry County. According to what I just heard, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I just heard was 1/3 of the revenue that we expect to get from this tax will come from visitors. That puts the other 2/3 of it on the citizens of Curry County. I don't believe that Ashland is a proper comparable. Ashland has 247 restaurants and draws thousands of people a day just to their Shakespeare Festival. To compare us to Ashland and how much we get is just, I believe that's an improper assertion. And Commissioner Boyce, you challenge for other options. I'll give you another option. Our number one tourist attraction in this county is our view from 101. We give it away for every day for nothing. Put a toll booth on the southern border, put another one on the northern border. We have 2,000 to 3,000 cars a day pass over the borders of this county. If you charge, giving everybody in Curry County a pass and only charging people who live out of county to come into this county will generate far more money than this consumption tax will, and it will have zero effect on the pocketbooks of the people of Curry County. I listened earlier as all these people came up talking about the food banks and necessity of food and how many food boxes they're preparing and how many kits they're preparing. And if you introduce and you apply a consumption tax to the people of Curry County, you can look for those numbers to double in the food banks. You know, people who are now eating 25 days a month are going to be eating 22 days a month when you start taking money from them. It's just absolutely and patently unfair. You look at any economic site, any tax site, you go to the IRS website in tax school, and they tell you that this tax is unfair to seniors, the poor, and the working poor. And I just think it's wrong for you to impose it upon the people of Curry County so that we can get some money from tourists when they come here for 3 months a year. The people in the county are going to be paying it all year long, and I just think that's wrong.
Would you like to serve on the ad hoc committee and help with the exemptions? Because the exemptions are pretty basic right now.
No, thank you, sir. I don't believe in this tax. I could not serve on a committee.
So how do we get our towers fixed?
Excuse me?
How do we get our towers replaced and updated? As Mr. Hitt said, it could be pushing us into darkness if we don't have communication. Where is that money going to come from?
Like I said, you put a toll on your southern border.
Okay, we had that option, and you and I in the paper today were called, what was it again?
Tweedledee and Tweedledum we've been nicknamed now, yes.
So,
you know, it's monetizing an asset.
I will say, Mr. Barnes, I have looked into that at length. I've been in touch with state legislators and a couple of federal ones. There is a way to do it, and that would be to get it off of federal highway and state-run highways onto county land. It would be pushing a boulder uphill. It would be a tremendous thing that would probably take years to get through the state legislature. It's not something that the county can just do.
I understand that, but you know, it is an option. You say Commissioner Boyce claims there's no other options and no one has come up with anything, and that's why we have to do this. But there are other options, and they are, you know, they're talking about doing it in Portland, paying people. People will have to pay to come into the city of Portland. I come from back east. You can't travel from one state to the next without paying a toll.
As do I.
I don't see why it would be so resistant here, especially if you made it so the people in Curry wouldn't have to pay for it.
Well, as you know, I was the voice behind that in the beginning, and I'm still behind it if we can find a way to do it, but I doubt we will.
But is it realistic? Okay, you just answered that. Thank you. It's not a realistic option.
Yeah. All right. So, next we're going to move on to the consent agenda.
Can I give a quick, brief summary of everything on the consent agenda?
Yes, you can.
Quick? So, with the Board of Commissioner minutes from January 7th, you'll notice a new format. We are not doing the transcript style format anymore. JJ did a good job, I think, on capturing what happened in the minutes or at the meeting. If anybody wants to see the full detail or review the transcript, or they can go on and look at the video. Next, we have the Juvenile Department Administrative Assistant Job Description Amendment. You've received that. You also have the Juvenile Department Crew Supervisor Job Description Amendment. That would be to have a supervisor at 8 hours a week. The director is here in case we have questions on that. We have the subscription agreement for non-represented employees, subscription agreement for bargaining unit employees, which you have in your packet. Appointment of Richard Christensen, the roadmaster, to SWAT, and then we did remove G, H, and I. We are adding the transfer order to hire Amy Gaddis Parker in the juvenile department to replace Summer Madison. And just a note on that order, it says Amy Gaddis. It should be Amy Gaddis Parker is her complete name. And then the final item we have is the hire order for Henry Eckert, which is basically rehiring Hank in the building safety department to help us out until we can get a for a full-time employee hired down there.
And that one's on a very limited basis, as I understand it?
It is.
1.5 days.
He is retired, so he can only work, he has to work less than 20 hours, so it's at 19 hours a week maximum.
Maximum?
Yeah.
Even that's a lot. Okay. All right. Anything further for the consent agenda? Need a motion?
So move, Mr. Chair, that we approve the consent agenda with changes.
Any further discussion? Roll.
Commissioner Gold.
Yes.
Vice Chair Boyce.
Aye.
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Carried unanimously.
I love you, JJ.
Some days, right?
Most days. Action items. Proclaiming March 2019 as the Revived Civility Month. And I will not go into a full reading of this. I'm sure the other commissioners have a copy of it before them. It is basically, as stated, it's being civil to one another and working together as a team, improving our language to each other. It has been nationally recognized. Ex-board member Lucy Labonte brought this to my attention, and I completely agree with her on this. I think it'd be a great step for Curry County to recognize this, and I would ask that the board recognize March as the Revived Civility Month.
I move that we recognize March as the Civility Month here in the county.
Any further discussion?
Just a comment.
Comment?
In the past, a couple of years ago, the board actually did pass, I can't remember if it was a resolution or a statement agreeing to be civil, and that was actually entered into a federal database. So if you want, we can try and get this entered in there as well.
Perfect. That'd be great. Yes.
We had a motion. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
Any further discussion? Commissioner Boyce?
Would you characterize, just personally, our meetings the last, since January 7th, as reasonably cordial?
I would characterize them that.
Thank you.
Do I have a second? I'll second that motion. Any further discussion? Roll.
Commissioner Gold.
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce.
Yes.
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Carried unanimously.
Commissioners, if I may really quickly, Lucy Labonte, League of Women Voters, I thank you for this. The city of Gold Beach has passed one. City of Port Orford's on the docket this week, and I believe City of Brookings is coming also to do it.
I'll be at the Port Orford's meeting, so I'll push him a little.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to B, 6B.
Okay, this is the personal services agreement with John Hitt for planning services. What you have before you is a draft services agreement. It did not have the date, under item number 4, it did not have the date on it, so I did add February 19th, which is when the day Mr. Hitt actually did start downstairs. That can be changed if you feel otherwise. And then we do have Exhibit A, which is the scope of work. And I know Chair Pash, you had a comment about making sure it was clear who the position responded to, or...
Well, I just wanted to make sure, yeah, exactly, is who he would answer to, and I believe that should be Director of Operations, and then, of course, the board if there's a further action needed. And I just wanted to make sure that that's how it was set up.
It was not specified, but we could. And I also think that it should be the planning director, because he would directly be taking direction from Ms. Crockett downstairs as he's helping her with the planning project.
Okay, and then the scope of his contract, is that with planning, or is that outside as well? I don't have this in front of me, I'm sorry.
Currently it says planning and other special assignments as assigned. So
What would special assignments be?
Well, he was just working on the consumption tax, so.
So we can do that as well, okay.
we can change that to be just planning specific, or to have the other assignments.
Well, is there any comments from the other rest of the board? I mean, I'd like to hear.
Well, If I may, Mr. Chair?
Sure, absolutely.
I'm just
of course.
absolutely thrilled to have him back.
As am I.
I know you are. Just having his presence in the planning, we've talked with Director Schmelzer about special projects. He volunteered his time on this possible consumption tax after I twisted his arm, so I feel personally obligated to him in terrific gratitude. So he's going to be working part-time. I wish it was more so. He comes at a tremendous bargain, and I hope it's in a very short order that we can easily justify a better pay for him. It's way low, but yeah, we're really glad to have him back in Curry County, and our success is going to be based on the people we're able to recruit to solve the incredible problems that we have at this county and make up for the 2 years we just lost. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I just wanted to make sure that we're just not having him as a fill person for everyone else's job is what I guess I'm trying to make sure.
Well, he could handle it, though.
I know your expertise is in planning. As you know, I've spoken to you privately about it, and I've known you for almost 30 some odd years I've known you. So, you know, I just like to make sure that the language is clear on that you're not going to feel like a yo-yo being drugged from room to room. And I know you want to make a comment. You can go ahead and step up, sir. Like I said, I just wanted to make sure that the language was clear on that, on your higher order, who you report to, and what your duties would be. And if one of us has a specific thing that we'd like you to look into for us, you know, I can see that happening as well.
If I could, Mr. Chair, what we usually do with these contracts is have a person be designated as a contract administrator, which even if the board wanted to liaise with Mr. Hitt, they would go through that contract administrator as well, so that the person administering the contract, because he's technically an independent contractor, he doesn't necessarily report. It's a subtle distinction. Very good, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, so why don't we do that? You're going to be working directly under the planning department director, and then if you could also maybe Ms. Schmelzer would be your contact person then as well.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I think it's a good solution, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Thank you. Just real briefly, the only other change I would suggest is under 3 on the first page, compensation not to exceed. I'm fine with the rate per hour and then not to exceed 80 hours per month, and I would just add a phrase there because I realize things can sometimes kind of bunch up, and then it's, you know, not so busy, and my time probably wouldn't be needed so much. So maybe add the phrase there, not to exceed 80 hours per month except as approved by the contract administrator. And then you would still have the cap of $24,000 per year, and you'd still have, of course, obviously.
Or 80 hours per month on average, something like that.
Or that would be another way of approaching it.
Okay. Yeah. So we can massage that language.
Okay, that's all I had. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Hitt, thank you for catching that. And yeah, there may be some weeks that we would need to extend over that. Appreciate it. Oh, I did have one more clarification. Is it your understanding that he will be under the planning department or under your direct supervision?
Well,
or both?
Council had suggested we could designate me as the contract administrator on that, so I would have the general oversight, but I think he should be reporting directly to Ms. Crockett because she's the one who has the work down there. She knows what needs to be done in the planning department. She's basically the one who has identified the need for help down there.
And is the board comfortable with using either Julie Schmelzer or Becky Crockett as the liaison to Mr. Hitt? In other words, what I think we'd like to avoid is for the board to just directly go to Mr. Hitt and give him work when, in other words, a coordination idea is the concept there, and having the coordination be through the Director of Operations and the Planning Director.
Well, I think our coordination should be through Ms. Schmelzer, and then she communicates to Ms. Crockett and to Mr. Hitt.
Nothing against Director Crockett, but no, I would prefer Mr. Hitt to be directly under your authority. That's just my one vote there, sir.
How do you feel?
Well, since he's working mostly with Ms. Crockett, I think he should be under her with Julie kind of coordinating the whole thing, and we go to her if we have some need for his services.
Council?
Thanks. Just a suggestion. Director Schmelzer also fills a role of Community Development Director who oversees Crockett. You might put in there that the contract administrator is Director Schmelzer or her designee. Then she can, as appropriately, designate Crockett. But in the meantime, John Hitt has one point of contact, the board has one point of contact, and that might solve all the questions there.
I agree. Thank you.
Thanks.
That's fine with me.
All right. Julie, you got that clear enough?
I
John
do.
Hitt, does that make sense to you? Okay, very good.
Everybody happy?
Can I just make one more comment?
Yes.
I think it's really important that we as a board think of the chain of command that we're supposed to be doing rather than inserting ourselves unnecessarily in things. So just a comment.
Okay. Thank you. All right, 6.
So what we would want the board to do would be to approve it with the changes we suggested or we discussed here today.
Yes. Do we need a vote on that, or are we good?
We need a vote.
Do I have a motion?
I move that we approve the personnel services agreement with John Hitt as amended.
Second, Mr. Chair.
Any further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold.
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce.
Aye.
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
C, wildfire threat, Jackson County resolution. Commissioner Boyce. Now we have some comments on this first, so why don't we take the comments first? And again, with time constraints, I would ask for brevity, please. Mr. Palmer.
Thank you. I'm Tim Palmer from Port Orford. I commend you for the civility endorsement. And I'm critical of this particular item, but it's about the language in it and it involves nothing personal. I'd like to ask basically some questions about this item that's on the agenda today. First, it's really not clear what is intended. Is it just to replace the name Jackson with Curry in the resolution in your packet? And if so, it's impossible to really know what is being asked for here, and therefore it's been impossible for citizens to know what is really being proposed. And so we've not really been notified of that. If you look at the details here under resolution item number 1 in this item in the packet, why is a resolution necessary to, quote, continue to cooperate with other county governments? I think we already do this. What path to solutions are you referring to here? How can we commit to a path without really knowing where it goes or what it is? Item 2 in the resolution, how does, quote, best science differ from, quote, best available science? What kind of science are you referring to here? What are the, quote, outcome-based agendas that it talks about? And the most cryptic one of all, a, quote, implementation schemes of artifice. I don't know what those are. Item number 3, why is it necessary now for the county to pass a resolution saying you oppose efforts to, quote, erode the county's authority? We function as a county since 1855. Why is this needed today? Item number 5, the resolution says you'll, quote, continue to actively cooperate in circumstances in which coordination is not applicable. This doesn't make a bit of sense to me. Why would, quote, coordination be, quote, not applicable? And if so, why would you resolve then to, quote, continue to cooperate? I just don't understand it. Item 6, this is the one that concerns me the most, unfortunately. It calls for, quote, legislative mandates to restrict the ability of organizations from performing services as a partnering group with a federal agency. I don't know what's intended by this, but what it says is that the commissioners would enact or support laws to stop organizations from working on partnerships with the federal government. When you considered this resolution last year, a lot of citizens showed up to oppose it. Here it is again. This could bar groups including the Wild Rivers Forest Collaborative, the Rogue River Watershed Council, and others. I'll leave it go with that. I'm shocked that we take this kind of heavy-handed overreach of government power over the freedom of county citizens in Curry County. Finally, I'd ask you to put this resolution aside and reject others that might be considered simply because another county passed them. Instead, focus on the jobs that your taxpayers are paying you to do. Many things, in fact, need to be done, but this resolution is not one of them.
Thank you, sir. Any
Mr.
comment?
Palmer, thank you for coming here today. If we lived in the Rogue Valley, we'd know why this makes sense, the smoke that they dealt with. Both these, if we want to save time, both of these resolutions were passed in 2017. And you can see what happened in 2018. A lack of effort on prevention of fires and as compared to suppression. Curry County's burning up. I'm not tired of saying it because it's the truth. And it's affecting our way of lives. And our communities are at great risk. I have people in Brookings that I respect and admire greatly that want to sue the Forest Service for the Chetco Bar fire mismanagement and almost losing Brookings. They do not have that attitude with the Klondike fire because they did everything they could with the resources they had. I was there every single day. As we march towards the next fire season, the only thing that you and I seem to disagree on, or one of the main things, excuse me, is what clear cutting does to our forests and the replantations. Okay, I can show you evidence, best available science, that shows a differing view than what your science has. You also mentioned, and I appreciate that, why are we connecting with other counties? Jackson County, their commission board, their legal department has worked very hard on this, and I'm even a little bit nervous what's coming to represent this year and the last two fire seasons combined. There's a lot of heartache out there, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of deep-rooted concern on what's, I'm just hoping and praying we have at least one or two seasons where we don't have this kind of destruction. And so to show support for Jackson County and the challenges that they have outlined for, and I could just read you one thing here real quick from actually a friend of mine, lives in Agnes, his name is Grotrian. And he, with me, I've been to at least 7 or 8 in 2 years, plus field trips on the Wild Forest, the Forest Collaborative, and there's some wonderful people on there. And they're determined. Not full agreement, obviously. However, he wrote a letter to Commissioner Gold, and I think I have it here, and basically it challenges my Save Oregon Forest Save letters, excuse me, Save Our Forest. Oregon's on the verge of being like California, and if that, as I've said in the past, I hope I'm wrong, because the amount of fuel that we have per acre or per square mile is so, you couldn't possibly compare it with California. All you got to do is look east and see the dense forest. So anyway, Mr. Grotrian wrote, the wildfire resolution, I'm strongly against the county adopting a go-it-alone stance towards management of public lands, most of which in our county is U.S. Forest Service land. Yeah, 63%, 54% in Oregon. Knowing Mr. Grotrian, I'm sorry or surprised that after he read my letter, that he interpreted that I'm wanting to go it alone. I've developed a relationship for this county, because I'm obligated to do that with a new forest ranger, and I'm just going to read one paragraph and try and understand, and I challenged Mr. Grotrian on this, how he come up with I want to go it alone, and I could give a lot of other examples, his response to my 3-page letter and how it affects Curry County. I must state, however, we should be grateful we currently have in place experienced and committed leadership in our Rogue River Siskiyou National Forest. He's coming next week, and I would encourage everyone to spend some time and look at his philosophy on wise forest management, public lands. And I hope you'll be here, and I would be much appreciative if you could make it. I also submit to the entire country in my strong but humble opinion that the Oregon Department of Forestry is simply the very best of the 14 western states. My confidence is bolstered by the hope of our U.S. Forest Service once again returning to great agency status. And there's some people out there determined to make that happen. Should that become a reality, Curry County is going to benefit greatly because we've got 1 million acres been burned in the last 32 years. The county's only 1 million acres, so obviously some of those have been a second, a third, even a fourth burn. So we've got to rebuild our forest long after all of us in this room are gone for the next generations. Great agency status, but they, along with the Oregon Department of Forestry, need robust public support. It's incumbent upon us that our state takes those reins in leading and legislating for the necessary changes. Mr. Chair, one more thing. Showing Jackson County that we're on board for changes, and what I think are very responsible changes. There are some things, I grant Mr. Palmer, that are a little bit confusing on this, but I'm going to defer to what they've been through. They certainly have compassion and empathy for what we've been through the last 2 years. Again, I finish with the level of risk that Oregon has in the months and years ahead. We're only 3 months. It could dry out starting today. And Port Orford, I'm going to say it again, Port Orford burned twice, abandoned twice. I mean, the list is incredible. It got within a quarter mile of my home at Agnes. The Blossom Bar fire in 2005 got within a quarter mile of my lodge. And it's just a miracle we didn't lose a Rogue River Canyon, the absolute #1 source of pride, arguably, for Oregon. Thank you. That's all.
Mr. Barnes? And if we could, Mr. Barnes, could we combine the two, please? Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yes, sir. I understand our need to support Jackson and Josephine County, but unfortunately, I don't believe that they have the same concern about us. The resolutions that we're talking about here today, as Commissioner Boyce just said, were put forth in 2017. Since that time, the Jackson and Josephine counties have gotten together and collaborated with people. A month or so ago, their state representative came down and pulled together everybody for a big town hall meeting to let people know what was happening. They brought together Forest Service people and forestry people and conservationists, and they brought everybody together to have a meeting. They've come out with the Rogue Valley Integrated Fire Plan, which we're not included in. There's also the Rogue Basin Reforestation, the Rogue Valley Reforestation and something else plan that came out around the same time that we're not involved with. Governor Brown went down to Medford on January the 30th and handed Jackson and Josephine counties a check for $1.5 million for reforestation and fuel reduction projects. We're not involved with that. You know, it's one thing to call for action. It's another thing to get up and do something for ourselves. I'd like to read briefly from the Community Mitigation Assistance Team report from the from the Chetco Bar fire. In here it says, invest most of your time and resources on risk reduction actions, not meetings. That's all we're doing here again, is having another meeting. There's plans out there. We have our community forestry plan. We have the Chetco mitigation plan. They all call for direct actions, direct fuel reduction actions, direct on the ground, boots on the ground, people doing things to reduce our fire risk. That's what we need now. We don't need more resolutions. We don't need more letters to people. We know what has to be done. We need to do it. You know, there's nothing holding us back from doing it. You know, all we're doing is fighting with people about things. This was all done because people came together and collaborated on stuff. I'm not seeing collaboration here. You know, all I'm seeing is, you know, one of the other things in his plan was that, you know, Curry is known for being able to tap into local expertise and local people to resolve our problems. We're not doing that. If all we're doing is re-upping other people's resolutions, you know, it's time for us to get off our butts and do something to help ourselves, other than just complaining that the fire season is right around the corner again. We haven't done anything to reduce our risk. You know, we can do something, you know, and we're not doing it. You know, all we're doing is talking about it, but there's things that we can do. You know, I can show them to you in this book. You know, there's things that we can do. We can start on them tomorrow. It's time to stop talking and start doing. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Commissioner Boyce?
Well, here's my number one solution, recommended. Reduce ground fuels, immediately put people to work, maintaining 100 feet thinning and fuel reduction, buffer on each side of key backcountry roads. Each side. I've spent a lot of time in the Oregon Department of Forestry to make sure their budget passed and how that'll affect Curry County. Governor Brown come through about 2 weeks ago, and I'm not trying to take credit, but I know she knows how this affected Curry County. She didn't come down here and hand us a check, but we're not done yet. Thank you.
I would like to say one thing. There are some people starting to do some things. I will concur with Mr. Boyce as to his actions, but we do have people that are local. We are going to be forming I don't want to say a task force, but an information gathering, and I know that's just people sitting at a table right now talking, but people like Larry Ismert and Lee Riddle and these kind of people that are part of Curry Wildfire Prevention, I have spoken with them, and they are going to be getting with people like Merv George, who I think is probably one of the most positive, personally, one of the most positive things to happen in Curry County for fire prevention. And he's willing to sit with these people and start to outline some guidelines and some things that we can do before fire season this year that we can start to do. And it's nice to have people like Lee Riddle and Mr. Ismert that have lived their lives in the forest here to explain, you know, the Chetco winds that nobody understood, and that's why we almost lost Brookings a few years ago. And forgive my passion on that, but I will say that there are things that are happening. I will be in Washington next week. One of the many meetings I will be at will be about reducing ground fuels in this county with Senator Merkley and Wyden. So we are moving forward with some things. I've got a very loud voice, and I hope you know by now that I'm not afraid to ask anyone for anything. So I will be banging on the door, not knocking.
I appreciate that, sir. You know, I read Senator Wyden's proposal when it came out in the fall. I've seen the money that was put forward in it from the farm omnibus bill. And yet still, you know, I don't see ads in the newspaper looking for people to go out and bang a rock and clear roads. You know, this is the way Mr. Wyden wrote his bill, was to put local people to work on local projects. And it's just, you know, the window's passing us by.
But what we have is we have a Forest Service guy now, first man in history, as far as I know, in history, to put a D9 cat on Forest Service land. And he said wilderness. And he said, if it cost me my job, it cost me my job. That's the kind of guy that's working with Larry Ismert and Lee Riddle that's going to be here next week to start to deal with the plans for this coming fire season.
I understand that.
He's an action guy.
You know, the one thing, you know, we keep complaining about the Chetco and how the Chetco was allowed to burn. I'm pretty sure that the people who were involved in managing that and made that call have long since been removed from the positions in Curry County.
Well, isn't
Why
that
keep complaining about them? You know, we need to move on. We need to move forward.
We need to move
Thank
on,
you.
sir. Mr. Palmer. 30 seconds, please.
I do not take issue with what Cordes said. My point is simply that stuff is not in this resolution. If you read through it, you'll see, I mean, nowhere in any of the resolutions proposed here is even the word fire mentioned.
Okay.
This is just, I don't know what this is about. It's not about what you were talking about. If you want to take an action, write it up so we could understand it in the words that you were saying. Or
didn't we decide that you and I agreed pretty much on the 9 solutions I presented? And I am working with Jackson County on that. And
I didn't agree with those, Court. I agreed with 3 of them.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad to have that clarified.
So do we have a motion on this?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
What's your motion? To approve it?
To approve the resolution to support the Jackson County, if I can put it in one motion, public land.
I'd like them separately, please.
You want
Separately,
separate?
please.
Okay. The wildfire
threat to Jackson County resolution?
Yes. I'm looking to give you the precise language here, but maybe that will suffice.
You guys have to forgive me. I got something in my throat today. I can't get it out.
The wildfire threat, yes, to Jackson County, the Curry County resolution, and any attention, yes.
Do
It
I have a
also
second?
is to a Curry County threat.
Do I have a second? I'll make a second for comment. I agree with a lot of what you stand on this. My problem with this is, as I've been very vocal out in the public about, I do think we need to define and refine the language in this. And I think when and if that can happen in the very near future, I would support this greatly. I have an issue with some of the language in this, and again, refining, where we're going to go with it. For lack of a better word, I'm on fire to get it done. Roll, please.
Mr. Gold.
No.
Vice Chair Boyce.
Yes.
Chair Pash.
No.
Motion failed.
Number D, public land natural cause fires. Do you have a motion?
So move, Mr. Chair, that we support the Jackson County resolution for public lands, regulations and policies.
Do we have a second? I'll second. Any further discussion? Roll.
Commissioner Gold.
No.
Vice Chair Boyce.
Aye.
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Motion carried, 2-1.
E, Vietnam War Memorial support and donation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If anyone has had a chance to go to the Capitol yet, it's about half done. It's just an incredible tribute to that war, and so yeah, I put 500 out there to show that, and I don't know what the sequence of that is, to show this group that we support, especially with the high number of Vietnam veterans we have within our county, and to support the resolution as well. Not a resolution, excuse me, just support and a donation. Would you like me to read more on that?
Commissioner Gold?
I just have one question. I know you want to do a donation, which is fine, and I'm all for the Vietnam War Memorial, but what budget is this coming from and that sort of thing?
Maybe you could be creative and make a recommendation there. Or maybe...
I don't know, the county is really strapped, and giving donations to other organizations is, even though I'm in support of the Vietnam War Memorial, I don't know that it's our purview to be giving donations to various organizations.
Well, we sure gave a lot of donations to attorneys the last 2 years.
I
It
think
failed
we just talked
miserably.
about civility. I'm sorry.
About what, 30,000? So we can't come up with 500 for. I'll tell you what, I can go out and get it. I'm just never surprised. I can go out and get it publicly unless you have support. I think we can find $500 after we wasted about. Never mind. I'll spare you. So that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Further comments? I will say this. You probably know. If you don't, I will tell you, I am the largest voice, and I would say probably in the country, for our veterans and the service. My issue with this is approving the War Memorial Fund. I will personally help with this immediately after this meeting. But to ask all of our taxpayers that there may be a group that don't support the War Memorial Fund to pay from their tax money into it, I feel it might be inappropriate. But I'll tell you what I'll do with you, is I'll work hand in hand with you until we get the 500 private donations. How's that?
I think that's admirable. Can I ask for an emphasis on supporting the effort of
absolutely.
Mr. Bates? Make sure that 500 from the county, I'm just processing that. We can't find that 500. It's
Well, again, I
it's
think we can
tough
find the
duty.
500, you know, and my issue is that our taxpayers, you know, they give their taxes to support the county, and
Who in the world doesn't support?
not
the
to be
vets,
rude,
though?
but they, you know, they might not support the memorial fund. So, and I don't know that there would be 1/10% that wouldn't, but it's just a difficult thing to ask all the
Okay.
taxpayers to pay. So,
Fair enough.
I'll walk hand in hand with you on it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gold.
I'm going to concur with you. I think it's up to individuals to donate to these very good causes. I'm not saying that it's not a good cause, but I think it's an individual donation that should be emphasized, not the county donating to various charities and so forth.
As far as this letter, I, of course, 100% endorse it. Anything to do with a memorial to the men and women that have fought and died in this country for all the causes that they've done, I 100% endorse this.
58,000 soldiers died in that war. Some still have never been located. I think it sends a really sad message that we can't go with 500. But again, Mr. Chair, I appreciate your personal willingness to contribute, and I'll match it dollar for dollar. Thank you.
All right.
Motion to submit the letter of support?
Yes.
What donation?
Thank you, Director Schmelzer.
So do we have a motion to submit the letter of support?
I so move.
Have a second? I'll second. Roll.
Commissioner Gold.
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce.
Yes.
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Carried unanimously.
MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, BOC Board of Commissioners and Fair Board. Julie?
Sure, we, at the last meeting, we had talked about committee update, and with the Fair Board, they do have to have us review. We have an MOU that says annually we'll review the MOU.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just before you, it's basically the same MOU we've had all along. Council Huddle may have other comments on it, but we're just asking you to approve it.
So I believe this comes to us with the signatures of the Fair Board as well, the current Fair Board. So they've reviewed it and are submitting it to you for review. There, just one issue that came up, there is a provision that the members of the Fair Board obtain a bond that's in the contract. We've checked with our insurer, and they do provide, they insure both us and the Fair Board, and they do provide the bond for the officers. So that condition is
So do we have proof of the bond, though? I mean, is there a letter in their policy that says that they are bonded?
I can get you the email from our...
Because I know I'm bonded on different things as well, but you have to put up the money for the bond.
Certainly, I can show you the chain of emails between me and our insurance company and whatnot. For instance, we also have a statute that requires our county accountant to be bonded. And then typically, even when they are bonded, the bond is paid for out of the funds of the organization, and the Fair Fund is a county fund. It kind of gets circular, but bottom line is I've got assurances I can provide you offline.
Perfect.
That they have the appropriate bonds and coverage for those kind of things.
Thank you, sir. All right.
That's what you call putting your money where your mouth is. I haven't held a $100 bill in a long time. Forgive the interruption there, Mr. Chair.
So I think it'd just be a motion to approve the MOU. It technically doesn't need approval, but since the Fair Board signed it, it just requires review. If the board wants further discussion on this in a workshop to go into details of the MOU, but it's been in place. I'm of the opinion if it ain't broke, don't fix it. There was the issue of the bond. I think we got that resolved, so I would just request a motion to approve.
I'm fine. Let's just, you know, I'll make a motion to approve it.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Roll.
Commissioner Gold.
Yes.
Vice Chair Boyce.
Aye.
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
All righty, advisory ballot question for the jumped ahead one. Citizens Review Task Force resignations. Julie Schmelzer.
Okay, so the board had established a citizen revenue task force, and recently we had several resignations. We are down to 3 members, so we do not have enough for a quorum. So staff just needs direction as to whether we draft an order or an ordinance, basically eliminating the committee, or if we advertise for more replacement positions.
Ms. Gold?
That committee was originally set up to be autonomous, and it was my understanding that those folks who resigned because there was commissioner intervention there. And I don't know if it would be advantageous to have another committee, because what happens is our commitments a lot of times are broken. So I don't think we should even have another committee.
So do you want to speak to that, Mr. Chair?
I will. Actually, after I was elected, I attended that meeting, I believe on 2 occasions. And because I was not sworn yet, no one had a problem with me being seated at the table. However, there was, the public was invited to that. And I feel if a commissioner is invited to, or if the public is invited to something and a commissioner or someone in authority of the county wants to sit in on those meetings in the general audience without comment to take notes, I don't have issue with that. You know, isn't it nice that committees are there to think of things and bring things out, and the general audience sits in the back and they may come up with an idea that after the meeting's over they can walk up to one of those committee members and say, you know what, I know somebody down in Duarte, California 30 years ago that had that idea, and this is how they ran with it, and they got it done. So the more public input that any committee can get, I think is fruitful. So therefore, I personally would like to see us retry to have a committee reseated. Ms. Gold?
Let me just add one other comment. A lot of times we've had these committees, they make recommendations, and I think this particular committee had spent hours and hours coming up with ways to generate revenue in the county, the first being the TLT tax. Another one that came out, from my understanding, was a possible restaurant tax. I don't even notice that here. And they had done a lot of research into this, and unfortunately, some of the ideas have been ignored. And I hate to see public come with an understanding of what's going to happen, and then it just blows up. It's hard.
Well, again, as we know, committees are just groups of people sitting around what I lovingly call spitballing, and to have things not come to fruition from that it's just part of doing business in your time. I will say that the consumption tax that Mr. Boyce has brought up here today, along with Mr. Hitt, I think would be looked on very favorably in the county if it is designated in the right areas, possibly in a food and beverage, or, you know, limiting the scope of the depth of that, to me, would be a way to get that passed, because I'm certain that everyone in the county now believes that Salem or Washington isn't going to fix our problems anymore. Rural Oregon is on our own, and we've got to fight for what we have here and what we believe. We've got to make it happen. Nobody's going to make it happen for us anymore. And anyone that thinks that that's not the truth, I feel bad for you, because it is the truth. So, you know, taking different parts of a food and beverage tax and putting it into the consumption tax and modifying it, I mean, those ideas will be moved. So there again, you've had a group of people that thought of something that will hopefully work its way into solving the problems of the county in a very obscure way.
Hope I didn't interrupt you, Mr. Chair. I really take exception, that somehow my attendance to that meeting was disruptive. I did have 2 different committee members express to me immediately following they were glad I was there. They knew I was there to represent the interests of the citizens of Curry County. Commissioner Gold mentioned just a moment ago, ideas were ignored. I'd like to have some clarification on that. And just in a general sense, what that means. So to suggest that I was disruptive is just absolutely not true. So thank you for your comments there a moment ago.
Okay.
So Commissioner Gold, do you want to elaborate on ideas that were ignored?
I didn't say anything about disruption. Nothing
What did
was
you
said
say at
on
the very
that.
first part there?
I said that the group was to be autonomous. The commissioners were not supposed to be there.
Yeah, and I
That
voted-
was the agreement.
Yes, ma'am. I voted in opposition to that, and we
And-
went through Ms. Director Smelzer to see if Mr. Pascher could attend that meeting. And,
Okay, well, I'm not going to get in a fight here. That's fine.
I'm just clarifying for your edification, ma'am. Thank you.
So what I'd like to make a motion is we move forward to reinstate a revenue task force for this Curry County for the in the very near future. And if the three that are already on it would like to just acknowledge by telephone that they would leave their name in the hat, that would be fine. And anyone new would need applications, of course. That would be my motion.
So just for clarification, just re-advertise to fill the vacancies.
Yes, that's my motion.
And just clarifying, it's not going to be dissolved.
No, we're not dissolving. That's what I said.
Thank
We're
you.
going to re-advertise to reseat. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further comments?
Is this going to is this committee going to be autonomous, or are we going to be? Are the commissioners supposed to be at these meetings? What?
Okay.
What?
And that's a very good question. What I would, in my motion, I would say that there will be allowed the public to be there. And if the committee wants to allow public comment or not, if their chair wants to allow public comment, that's their discretion. But if a commissioner or someone wants to be present in the audience, and if the chair wants that to be silent, then so stated. I can't imagine why they wouldn't want to have someone, a Julie Schmelzer or one of us at that meeting just to sit and listen without necessarily interjecting in the meeting.
Mr. Chair, it's illegal to say elected public official can't go to a public meeting. It's ridiculous. Thank you.
Any further comments? Commissioner Gold.
Let me just say one thing. As long as things are understood ahead of time, I don't have a problem with it. But once a decision is made by the commission, that means the entirety should abide by that decision. Otherwise, we become a dysfunctional board. And I think I've discussed this before, but I think it's important that once a decision is made, we abide by that decision. And that's all I have to say on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's a prior board, once again, committing another board. So that's why I didn't go to any meetings prior to January 7th, whatever.
Okay, so let's move forward. Let me clarify my
I think that could
motion.
use some discussion, but thank you anyway.
You want more discussion?
Well, I mean, here we just say we can't bound another board, and yet that's exactly what we did on two occasions that cost a lot of money. I'll stand down. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Gold.
Let me just say the board is bound until some action is taken. That's all I'm going to say.
A lot of work done.
Anyone else? All right. So let me amend my my motion here. That we advertise to reinstate the Revenue Task Force. Hopefully the three that are already on it will stay, and we can get some new people. In the advertisement, we may want to clarify that the public is welcome to attend, and it will be the Revenue Task Force Board Chair will make the decision if public comments are allowed. That's a pretty long motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Any further comment? Roll.
Commissioner Gold.
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce.
Yes.
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Carried unanimously.
Mr. Barnes. We are on the advisory ballot question, marijuana tax.
I didn't see, was there a statement posted that you were going to put out there to the voters?
Well, we're deciding if we're going to have a question put on the ballot or not is what today is for, but you had a comment slip filled out on it.
Yes, I did. I would just want to know if you had one put together or not, and if you haven't yet, then once again, I just want to reiterate, like I said at the last meeting, I think it's a poor idea. It's based on disingenuous numbering, and it's not going to bring in what the county thinks it might, and I'm opposed to it. Okay. You know, like I said before, if you're going to tax Oxy.
Thank you. Ms. Schmelzer?
So just a comment. When Commissioner DeYoung was here, there was discussion about putting this matter on the ballot as an advisory question. And so I was directed to take the Josephine County example and turn it into the Curry County question. So that's what I did, and I do have before you. I was able to finish it last night. It basically is worded exactly the same as what you reviewed from Josephine County. I am just waiting to get the actual numbers from the Department of Revenue for Exhibit B, which talks about the amount of money that the county has received so far. But it is, other than that, it's worded the same as the example you reviewed before.
Okay. My issue with this is, the more I've looked into it, is the expense of it and the amount of labor it takes to put this out. I think if we, just like the consumption tax, I think if we work on that now and get it straightened out, I don't really know as we need to have a question put on the ballot for the expense. Let's get what we want put up right and present it to the public as the actual ballot vote and not an advisory question. I don't know what we stand to gain by having a question that, would you vote for this or not? Well, I think we're going to move forward with a consumption tax of some sort. Like you say, how broad it's going to be is yet to be determined. But I think to spend the resources to just ask a question, would you vote for this, would you not vote for this, on the marijuana tax and or the consumption tax is wasting a lot of our county employee time that I don't think is well spent.
Mr. Chair, there's also one perhaps unintended consequence, because once we put a measure on a ballot, you talked about county employee time, there's actually limitations and restrictions on what county employees can even do then. So if the board was actually, as you said, contemplating more work by putting it on the ballot, it may actually put us in some kind of a strange timeout where we're losing the ability to work on it. So it's just an unintended consequence. The election part is really, again, up to the board.
Commissioner Gold?
I spoke with Renee Colon, I think it was yesterday, and she mentioned that we are not even set up to have an advisory question on the ballot, and the reason we're not is because there has to be an ordinance from the commissioners, and I'm not against an advisory question necessarily, but I think we need to go about it in the proper way. There has to be an ordinance, and I think getting either of these issues as an advisory question on the May ballot would be impossible.
And that's my point. I think we could get an ordinance put in place. It would push the May ballot, so it would be on the September ballot. And I think if we work smartly in the next month or so, I think we can get everything ironed out on what we would want to put on the ballot anyway. So I think we would be wasting time inevitably by doing this on the September ballot for a question when we might be able to have it on the ballot for a vote. Because again, I believe that most in the county know that we have to find revenue sources, and there's no big one fix. But if we can massage the language of a consumption bill or a consumption tax and the broadness of it into something that's palatable for everyone in the county, and get the county up to speed, get them fully informed on what's going to be in that and how the money will be spent, I think that's the best approach and the best dollars spent for our county. Commissioner Gold.
I think we ought to form an ordinance for an advisory question that could possibly go on the ballot. Not necessarily these questions, but there are times when it would be very advantageous for us to be able to put an advisory question on the ballot. So I think it would be judicious for us to have that ordinance in place in case there were some type of question that we wanted on the ballot that would be very advantageous for us to have that ordinance in place. These I don't think could go on the ballot as an advisory question anyway because we have to have that ordinance, but I think having an ordinance in place would be helpful for the future.
I just want the board to understand, and I have, talked with Renee about this as well, and she's explained to me the amount of, oh, she must have been watching. She's explained the amount of work. She's explained the amount of work and money that goes into this. So, again, sometimes having a question, it may be good to have an ordinance, but for the amount of time and effort and cash dollars that it takes to get this on the ballot, I don't know that it's fruitful.
Let me make one other comment before she goes ahead. I think sometimes there are appropriate times to have advisory questions on the ballot. Okay, if that is the case, the entity that wants that, I think, should pay for the expense to have that.
Ms. Colon,
Hi.
your 3 minutes are on.
Renee Colon, Curry County Clerk. I have nothing to report. I'm just here in case you had a question.
Okay. Commissioner Boyce.
You probably know, I don't, but I'm sure you know, when we're only having the May primary, what is the additional cost to have the advisory questions go before the electorate?
So you've asked a very complicated question.
Okay, I'm sorry. Even in a general sense? What
So,
this would be?
and that's hard to just give you a what if. The cost report is based on administrative rule and by statute on how the formula is applied, and it's based on how many issues are on the ballot, how many people are registered at the time, how many people have voted at the time. But what you're saying is we're already paying for the primary election, so that's in our budget. So what's one more question? Is that what you're asking?
Well, yeah, again, in a general sense.
So, Shelley, whenever I say an approximate of something in the future.
You lived, okay, fair enough. Sure.
So, but we're talking a few $1,000s.
How much?
A couple of $1,000s.
Okay. Because I heard 25.
Approximately.
I heard 25,000, and there may be a better way to have.
No, that's for the whole thing. That's for the whole county. That's a county-wide election.
Well,
it's $25,000.
I think you explained that to me several months back on something else.
Well, you're talking about $2,000, but how many hours of staff time as well?
Now, we're talking advisory measures, correct?
Yes.
So, for me, as your county clerk, advisory measures are not binding. It's a survey.
Yes.
So if you're using the official ballot box for surveys, that to me is more of a question to be talked about than, the actual cost of extra measures on a ballot. So, I don't think I can remember when we've had an advisory measure on the ballot to the voters in the 32 years I've been here. So if this is a process you're going to start doing, just remember that it is not binding. It is just a survey, and you're using the official election office's resources for a survey. If I understand it right, even if you do the survey, you do the question as advisory, you still have to turn around again and ask the question officially. Is that correct?
Right, you would have to take a vote on an actual ordinance or a tax or an ordinance establishing a tax, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Gold, did you have something? Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yes, that's okay. Two things. This is incredibly valuable data that we have never done before, and I think we don't spend money just so we can show leadership, but to the extent we can get that kind of information, especially on an issue this big. In addition, the public awareness aspect, if people, they already voted once on recreational marijuana, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, whatever, okay? And that was fairly, by a pretty good margin. I just want to read something real quick, 3 sentences. Marijuana, Mental Illness, and Violence by Alex Berenson, author, Tell Your Children the Truth About Marijuana, Mental Illness, and Violence, okay? There it is. Incredibly well educated. Do all people use marijuana violent? Heavens no. And we've talked about the medical aspect, and there's greater information coming on that all the time. But to let the public know that we see this, even though it has been less intense than we may have predicted a couple years ago, a lot of it based on what was going on in other Southern Oregon counties. My preference right now if it's a couple $1,000s, and I'm not going to hold you to that, to say to the public, where do you stand on this? How should we be leading in this issue? Can we bring you to the table to work towards any possible future problems that maybe we're not even aware of now? So yeah, I would rather have the advisory
Commissioner Gold?
option.
Let me just say one thing about advisory versus survey. When you send out surveys, just a normal survey, most people do not respond. If you put this on a ballot, you would get a better response and you would have a better feeling of what the public actually wanted. Even though it costs a few extra dollars, you may save a whole lot of dollars later on as a result of knowing exactly what the voters want.
Okay, so I have another question for you, Ms. Colin. Given that we don't have the final numbers from Ms. Schmelzer yet, let's say we could get those in the next week. We don't know what the numbers are on the marijuana, correct?
On the revenue, potential
Yes.
revenue? We do not know the exact numbers. There's also discussion at the state level as to whether or not the proposed bill is going to change. And, you know, one idea that I heard recently, instead of collecting it as presented by Mr. DeYoung, that perhaps it be collected only if the product is leaving the county, crossing a county line. At that time, it would be taxed. So there's some, you know, the formula isn't decided yet. It hasn't been put out to the voters yet. My understanding was this was to gauge whether there was interest in this county in pursuing this further.
So being on the time constraints we are currently in, is this going to be for the September ballot, or can we still make the May?
So the special district election that we're working on right now, the deadline for you all to present measures to us is Friday.
Tomorrow, or yeah, Friday.
So I can't see
So-
this happening before.
No, you have to have a special ordinance to
Right,
get.
we have to get the ordinance
Yeah,
first. So what I'm saying is if
We're
you want to...
talking 2 meetings.
If you want to have an advisory question, it'll be on the September ballot.
Okay?
So then it wouldn't be able to be voted on until the following May, am I correct?
If you're going to put an advisory measure on the next applicable election, I don't have that date in front of me. It's September. I'm not sure
think it's
exactly.
September.
So that would be the date that you wanted to put the measure to the advisory measure to the voters?
Yes.
Okay. So you have September.
And then from that, then it would, if we then did decide to do it, because you got a significant question answered from the public, it would not be able
So
to
for
go on
November, so the
ballot
next
till
special district election is November, and I'm not sure, does this taxing measure have to go on a primary or a general? Because that's not the season that we're in right now. So
Okay. Commissioner Boyce.
Just quick confirmation from Council Huddle. We do have to do that ordinance. And
Thank you. So it's an Attorney General opinion that before you can put an advisory measure to the voters, you need to have a law in place, your own county law, your own law, that authorizes you to do so, because the state law doesn't have a separate allowance for advisory questions. The 2 examples that were given to us, Josephine County and Coos County, both of those counties have on their books an ordinance that authorizes them to give an advisory question to the voters. Also voters, I might have said voters, also other entities do, other cities. And then historically, we had such an ordinance on our books way back when, and we repealed it when we codified our ordinances. And it's possible, I don't know why we repealed it, maybe we didn't use it that much, but so we did have that. It's an Attorney General opinion based on the status of the law. There's a statute that says you can put a question as a measure, and there's no case law on it, but it seems to be the standard practice to have an ordinance to authorize you to give an advisory question. We don't have such an ordinance, so there's, you know, an argument that we need that ordinance.
is that old ordinance thus appealed available, readily available?
Right. Yes, I think you know, it's not a very lengthy ordinance, and it would have to be adopted. So, in theory, you could adopt an emergency ordinance in 1 reading by unanimous vote, and it's effective on adoption. Then you would have that ordinance in place, and then you could you'd be over that hurdle. But it doesn't get you past the other non-technical legal hurdles that have been discussed today. So.
Could you reinstate the old ordinance in 1 meeting?
Right, it would be we just need to adopt an emergency ordinance doing so, and that requires, you know, we'd have to have it, it would probably take, it would come up, Julie, what's that last item on our, sorry, Director Schmelzer, what's that last item on our agenda? It says other matters not on the agenda.
Yes.
So we would bring it in at the end, we'd bring in the old ordinance, it would come for a reading as an emergency ordinance. If the board adopted it, then after you had the ordinance in place, you'd still be considering these questions again that, you know, the clerk has been letting you know about. So.
Can I ask a question?
Ms. Schmelzer, go ahead.
And I don't know, I think I glanced at that ordinance, I think it was 83, I'm not sure what year that was, and I think it read something like even if you had the ordinance, you still had to have public hearings on whether or not what measure it is and whether or not it was applicable to the board through the ordinance.
I hadn't read it so clearly as that, but I think it did require that. The part about it is we might have looked at both Josephine County and Coos County's ordinances as well, and they might not have that public hearing element. I think that was so again, it's a matter of local legislation, so everyone can do it differently. But yes, our past ordinance had a requirement for public hearings. We had looked at the other two models of the ordinances from the other counties, and I don't know if they had the public hearing requirement in there. So,
well, could you, during the lunch break, make an emergency ordinance on this to put at the end of the meeting under others?
Well, if that's what the board directs, yes. And then, by the way, I think the natural
unanimous.
consequence, well, it would just be consensus to direct me to do that, and then yes, you'd have to do unanimous. My hunch would be then you would just continue the two items we're talking about right now, the marijuana measure and the consumption tax question till after that. So that's just, I think, how it would happen step by step.
Commissioner Gold?
Could we discuss these two questions before, and if a motion is made, it would be contingent upon that ordinance being passed?
I see. Trying to just get stuff done. Sure, Commissioner Cole.
Thank you.
Yep.
Oh, I'm not supposed to hit you.
No,
sorry.
that's okay.
All right, so we've got about 10 minutes left before the lunch break, so why don't we go ahead and discuss the question. Can we have a reading of them? Do you have the marijuana question there?
Sure. We can do it by title only, or we can read the entire thing.
Let me go through and find it on my sheet.
Was this handed out at our places, Julie Schmelzer, or no?
No,
yes.
it's not.
Would you like me to read it, Mr. Chair?
Or give it
It's
to
short.
John Huddle's legal assistant.
Okay.
Do you have more questions for me?
No, thank you.
All right.
So the way do you want me to proceed?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the way it is written was, whereas ORS, first of all, it's in the matter of referring to Curry County voters at the May 21st, 2019 election in an advisory question on marijuana taxation. Whereas ORS 254.005, parent 6, parent small e parent defines measure as a proposition or question, and whereas the Curry County Board of Commissioners Board desires to submit to the electors at duly scheduled elections advisory questions on matters of interest to the county. Whereas Curry County residents are affected by the production, processing, transporting, and selling of marijuana and its products within the county. And whereas the board has determined that the electors of Curry County should have the opportunity to express their opinions as to whether the county should take steps to tax the production of marijuana. Now therefore, the Curry County Board of Commissioners hereby resolves: 1. The advisory question in the ballot title attached hereto as Exhibit A shall be referred to the electors of the county for their yes or no vote. 2. The ballot title and explanatory statement attached hereto and marked as Exhibits A and B are approved for submission to the Curry County Elections Officer, County Clerk, for the May 21st, 2019 election. The Curry County Legal Counsel will certify Form SEL 801, the Notice of County Measure Election as required by law. For the following certification, the Curry County Legal Counsel shall cause to be delivered to the County Clerk this resolution, ballot title, Form SEL 801, an explanatory statement for the voter's pamphlet for further action as required by law for placement on the May 21st, 2019 election ballot. 5. The County Clerk shall give notice of receipt of the ballot title and notice of elector's right to petition for review of the ballot title as provided by law, done and dated this February 20th, 2019. And then Exhibit A, the caption, advisory question on marijuana production tax. Question, in your opinion, should Curry County be able to tax the production of recreational and medical marijuana? Ballot summary. The outcome of the election on this advisory question will not be binding. It will provide information to the Board of County Commissioners while the board formulates policy.
That's good, Julie. Yeah, the rest of that is just state laws and stuff.
Then Exhibit B.
Yes.
In 1998, Oregon, it goes through the history of passing Measure 67. Since the passage of Measure 67 in 91, the Oregon legislature has approved statutes that authorize the creation of rules and taxation, and it goes through the revenue that the county has seen since then. State law currently prevents counties from taxing marijuana production. In December of 2017, the Association of Oregon Counties recommended state law be changed so that 5 southwestern counties could tax marijuana production. Subsequently, Douglas withdrew from that proposal and Lane County joined in. Following legislative approval, voters of each county could then decide whether to impose such a tax. Property tax rates would not be impacted. The state currently collects annual fees for medical and recreational marijuana, so they would continue to collect this tax as well. The outcome of the election on this advisory question will not be binding. It will provide information to the Board of County Commissioners while the board formulates policy.
And then the language on the consumption tax is very similar as to the legal aspect of it. And then the question for the ballot measure would be, in your opinion, should Curry County tax goods and services purchased in the county? Exemptions would apply. And that would be that ballot measure question. And then it goes on to have an explanatory statement for the voters' pamphlet on where those funds would be directed, which would probably be able to be worked on before the ballot actually went out. So
yes, that would be pretty important. Excuse me.
With the consumption tax advisory question, what it does is Exhibit B reiterates basically what was presented this morning in that presentation as far as where the funds would be directed and what percentage they would be directed to.
Well, again, I will say this. I will say that I think I would prefer to move forward with just the ballot measure itself and not the question. We could get it on the earlier ballot that way, and it would give us still enough time, I think, to put together a task force or a group of people to decide how things are going to be done, especially on the consumption tax. And I would also like to look into the medical marijuana end of this as part of a special section that we could talk about further. It's of course that would be the one vote. The rest of the board would have the choice on that, but that's my opinion. Commissioner Gold.
So I have one question. If these two advisory votes are supposed to be put on the ballot or get to Renee by Friday, can they be amended? Because I'm looking at some of this stuff and I'm not sure that all of it should go on the ballot as written. I don't know whether it could be amended or not. I have no idea.
What I would recommend is a special meeting on Thursday or Friday morning. We do have to do a 24-hour notice for the meeting, but I would think that gives us time to look it over a little closer and to do any research that we need versus making a quick decision on it.
I think that would be very advisable.
Commissioner Boyce.
Thank you. I'll be calling in, but I can explain why. I want them on the ballot, just by personal preference, and I think the public opinion on these, even in a starting general sense, would for $1,000 each, give or take. I think it's good business for where our county is headed. Thank you.
Well, then, why don't we make a motion to council huddle?
I think you just take the items one at a time as they're on the agenda. I think the first one is the marijuana referral, and then
Well, we're going to put these after, though, because now we're going to ask you to do an emergency ordinance for the vote.
Well, what we could do is say contingent upon getting an ordinance for an advisory ballot question.
All right, contingent upon. Go ahead and make your motion.
Okay, I'll make a motion to accept the advisory ballot measure for marijuana tax based on, or contingent upon getting a ordinance for an advisory vote for the county.
Do I have a second?
Second, Mr. Chair.
Any further comments?
Commissioner Gold, would that include inserting the updated numbers from Department of Revenue?
That would be good, yes.
Any further comments? Roll.
Commissioner Gold.
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce.
Yes?
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
All right. And then we have I, advisory ballot question on the consumption tax. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to put on the advisory ballot the question of 1, discuss the pros and cons of a consumption tax, 2, legal and procedural issues, and 3, discuss the timeline for... no, we just did that. So just there's into my motion, sir.
Is it contingent upon getting a
Yes.
ordinance for an advisory vote?
He said yes.
Oh, okay.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Roll.
Commissioner Gold.
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce.
Yes.
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
So before we break for lunch, I'd like to recognize Mr. Roy Davis, the chair of the Porter Brookings Harbor Board, sitting here, sir. Thank you for joining us. We are at lunch. We will reconvene at 1 o'clock.
We will be going into exec session at 1 o'clock as well,
yes.
so
Yes.
that may take an hour or so.
Well,
so
we still have the director's report and then commissioner's updates, so we will be in executive session after those.
Okay, thank you.
Well, actually, after the 2 o'clock.
No, we'll get this done. We'll get done. Because you're only going to get 3 minutes of your comments. Would that be best, do you think?
Well, we've noticed it for 1 o'clock, and if that's okay. And, oh, by the way, for your information, I talked to the roadmaster. He was going to be the item with advice of legal counsel, had to deal with issue and enforcement action. He's going to be here at 2 o'clock. He says we can do his thing at any time. So if we're short on time, we might just do the one item on the exec session for now.
Well, I think we'll be fine on time.
Very good. All right.
But he wasn't coming now, was he, actually?
He'll be here at 2.
Excuse me, I missed that. Okay.
All right, so we're going to go in executive session now. And it shouldn't be long. It should probably be more than about 15 or 20 minutes.
Did you get something to read onto the record? Thank you.
You got one of these?
It's just for you to read into the record. If you could, read it into the record.
Yeah, would we close the doors, please?
Well, you can read that in public, so it's...
Now,
We're still in regular meeting.
okay, the Curry County Board of Commissioners will now meet in executive session pursuant to ORS 192-6602. B, to consider discipline of an employee if the individual does not request an open meeting, which is misspelled. I'm sorry. F, to consider information or records exempt from public laws. H, to confer with counsel on rights and remedies in regard to litigation. If not relating to union bargaining, representatives of the news media or designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room, please. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on or otherwise disclose any of the deliberations or anything said about these subjects during the executive sessions except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
No decision may be made in executive session. If we make a decision, it will be made in an open public meeting. At the end of the executive session, we will return to open session and welcome the audience back into the room.
Okay, and we got to switch the disc out a couple things to do here.
Yeah, I got getting in that, so you're not going to get me that easy.
There's just a lot of spinning that goes, come on.
Okay. We'll be back in normal meeting? Okay.
Yes, sir. I'm just waiting for JJ Slowpoke over here.
There we go.
All right, we are back in session for a regular session. It is 1:31 on February 20th in the afternoon, and leaving our executive session, I'm advising County Administrator Julie Schmelzer to proceed as directed from the Executive Session Board.
Sure. Is there a motion to that effect?
I make that motion.
Second, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Any further discussion?
Just a clarification, Director of Operations.
Thank you.
Sorry. Good.
All right.
Yeah, there's no deliberation on this, just a straight vote. Roll call vote, JJ?
Commissioner Gold,
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce,
Yes.
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to Director's Report. You know what I saw? I was looking at that already, and I saw administration there. That's why I said it.
And some of the other stuff we had in front of us had that. So I just want to give a little update on the administration side, or the Commissioner's Office side of things. As you're aware, we have, for the most part, completed our relocation process. We do have some work to do with the CCH office yet. I obviously have to unpack and clean things in my area, but...
I was hoping you were going to say that.
I haven't heard, I was not here, of course, during the actual relocation, but I...
Oh, are you on the mic?
Oh, sorry, I took it off the door. But I have heard that things went fairly well, so that's good. We have discussed a meeting schedule at a workshop that was actually emailed out to you either late last night or early today. The meeting schedule is flexible. I don't want to say flexible. I mean, we want to try and stick with that schedule as best we can. But if there are issues that arise, such as schedules, or somebody has a night meeting when we have a meeting scheduled or something, it's something we should discuss as we go along. But for the most part, let's just try and stick to that schedule. Also, delivered a liaison list to the department heads with a copy to the commissioners. Updated that this morning as well. There was one change on there. So that should help as we move forward, that department heads know who their liaison is and who they should be working with. And then also so the commissioners know who their department is or what organization they're affiliated with, to kind of keep us all focused and working together so we're not crossing paths on stuff. As far as the community development side of things go, the planning director has been downstairs for a little over a month now, about a month and a half. There's a substantial amount of work down there. She's really doing a great job as far as I'm concerned. She did need some help, and we approved that today to have John come down there and help. We also have 2 other people working part-time down there to try and help her get things arranged, but hopefully by midsummer we've got things trucking along that we can reevaluate that and see with the budget, you know, do we need a full-time person down there, or can we continue on with part-time people?
Can I just ask one little question relative to that? I've heard that there is a great need to get all of those records on the computer. Is she working on that, or?
Okay, so that was...
Is that your idea?
Yeah, that was a proposal that I had, Commissioner. I don't think that the planning director will have the time to dedicate to that.
Not just her, but I mean even get someone from the outside to come in and do it. Maybe
Yes.
a consultant or something. Because it would be so much more efficient to have it that way.
Right, I agree with you. So my goal is to have those records all scanned and in electronic format, then to actually have a public computer station downstairs where somebody can come in and sit there and pull up these files, or if somebody does a public records request, we can answer it electronically versus having to go through a lengthy process trying to find the file, and is there another file in a different room, things of that nature. That we do have to put out for an RFP. Because I do expect that to be more than $10,000, and then I'll also have to find grant work for it. But I've also talked to some of the staff downstairs about whether or not they would be able to make the time to pull apart the files. So when you do those electronically, you can just take the boxes and you give it to the company, or you can have somebody go through and pull out the staples and make sure there's no sticky notes or anything in there. And that keeps our costs down on the end. So that is the route that I've been discussing with some of the staff down there. So as far as the building safety side of things go, we still do not have a full-time building official. HR just ran that advertisement, I believe, yesterday or today. My goal is to hopefully find a building official that has all of the certifications that we need so we don't have to pay multiple people to do inspections. until such time as until we're to that point, we're just going to have to keep going with the assistance that's been offered to us. We have former employee that you approved this morning that'll come back and help on some matters. Don Sigvartson was a former employee who stays on, has come back and does some work for us, and then Dave Bassett also, we have an agreement with him to provide some of those services as well, and Brookings helps us with some things as well. But it would be nice to actually get to the point where we have a full-time building official or some arrangement worked out where we don't have to be having all these various contracts, and it'd make it easier, better customer service for the contractors. They know exactly when they can expect somebody in the office or inspections in the field, and I believe that would also help with the revenue sources as well in that department.
Could I, even though it seemed like, if I'm not mistaken, Commissioner Boyce was instrumental in getting that other employee to come back to keep that place functioning. Isn't that the case? Anyway, I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure credit was given where credit's due. So,
well, thank you. I couldn't, you're supposed to say a team effort.
Yeah.
Well, it really was. I mean, there's just no question about it. And I'll just add real quick, just the 7 or 8 meetings we've had since January 7th, it truly is a new day. And seeing you, I'll save the compliments, but it's just been great to work with you absolutely to date.
Well, I
Thank
plan
you.
on staying for a while, so thank you. From the economic development side of things, we do have our economic development coordinator is scheduled to start tomorrow. She still will be helping out in her previous department to help with the transition on some things. We do not want to leave, she came from the juvenile department, so we do not want to leave them without assistance. So although she effectively starts tomorrow in economic development, I have authorized her to continue to go back and help and train with the new employee, so we're not left shorthanded in that department as well. And then finally, just note that in the surveyor's office, we are looking for a part-time person down there. We have, Julie Swift has advertised to the schools in the past for that position. I've talked to the economic development coordinator to see if maybe she could reach out as well to see if perhaps there's some arrangement with the school where we could try and get people interested in learning the surveying skills, so that we have surveyors here, or at least a training program to keep people going so we don't have to continually look for assistance down there. I also have concerns that we don't have a backup plan for the surveyor should he decide to retire or something happen to him. So I'd like us to get to the point where we actually have succession planning on all of these departments if we can.
So we have 2 part-time surveyors down there. Did something happen that I'm unaware of? That
He just resigned. The surveyor notified us this week that he has resigned and we're going to have to find a new part-time
Riley
person.
Smith.
Riley Smith notified us that the part-time.
God, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Captain Brookings?
Yeah.
I was about to fall out of my chair. So, but we still have 1 part-time, and that's why you're looking. I follow.
Has
Thank
Julie actually talked to, say, the superintendents of schools to make sure that that gets out to the schools rather than just an advertisement in the newspaper?
I do not know that, Commissioner Gold, but the Economic Development Coordinator has said she's going to, one thing we have talked about is the fact that having perhaps like a youth partnership program where we help children get skill set and get them into jobs.
I'm thinking job shadowing, possibly.
We don't have that right now in the county other than, a foundation that perhaps trains youth or maybe through an individual school. So one of the things that I would hope we can get to when we do our economic development strategic plan is the fact that we can actually have a path for these children, and it is something that we're doing county-wide.
So as the liaison to the schools, would you like me to contact the superintendents individually and just tell them there may be an opportunity for a student to do some job shadowing with the surveyor and then possibly come up with a part-time job during the summer or whatever?
I think that's a great idea. I think we should wait until tomorrow and sit down with the Economic Development Coordinator.
Okay, that's
and then
fine.
You could work directly with her on that.
Okay,
Do
I
with
just...
Great idea.
Deal with code enforcement and all that as well.
Pardon me?
You can get involved in that in code enforcement and everything.
Yes, and then just a little update on the code enforcement side of things in our office. Mr. Fortman is doing great. He has over 70 cases right now. I believe 50 of them are active or that he's working on. saw another one that was delivered to him yesterday, so he's doing a really good job.
So just let me know about job shadowing as far as the superintendents, and if you have other areas you want job shadowing in, let me know.
Julie, if I could, one specific, I was with Director Schmelzer when Mr. Fortman talked to us about his code enforcement caseload, but one of the particular properties was down, I think, on Ocean View Drive, south of Harbor, and it was a burned out property. Before he came along, I was involved, and John Hitt was involved in a lengthy court process to get court orders to get to the point where we would get a house demolitioned and ready. On that one on Ocean View Drive, he said that it's been demolished and they're ready for permits. So very
good
again,
news.
Yeah, exactly. I thought it's just a great use of county resources, and again, that it's done quickly without a lot of legal hassle. So I think that's a nice story for him to report, for Julie to report there.
Well, and I've heard some good comments from some of the neighbors that have been involved in the messes around, so.
And on that note, I would like to say we are downsizing our motor pool, as you know, and we are looking for a vehicle for code enforcement and the surveyor's office to share. A 4x4, they need a 4x4 to get out in more rural areas. If we can find him a 4x4, I've spoken with him, because we do have an issue with some pets in the county that we've heard several complaints about, and our sheriff really doesn't want to get involved in. Well, it actually is a code enforcement issue with licensing and a lot of that, and I've talked to Mr. Fortman, and he said he would love to be involved in that as well. So I think by summer we're probably going to need a second code enforcement officer, but he is excited to get involved in that program as well. So for those out there that have complaints about pets, you know, he will be someone that down the road hopefully we'll be able to look to solve a lot of those issues. Commissioner Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Pets as in danger?
Yes.
Thank you. Does that also include a vehicle 4x4, not 4x4, but for VSO Officer Bowdy?
Yes. That's all
okay,
done. That's
good.
getting done too.
Thank you. That's all I have for now.
Okay.
Were you still reporting?
Yes, she was.
I was just going to conclude by saying, as with that vehicle for Mr. Fortman, we're going to have to look at budgeting for a radio for him too.
It's going to come with a radio in it.
Okay, because he does get to some pretty remote places, and I want to make sure he's safe in that.
Yeah, we'll have a sheriff's radio built right into it when we order it.
Would they?
I just was watching, and you were talking about the surveyor position. Last time around, I did send it to the superintendent, or I did send it to the school districts at Gold Beach and at Brookings. Haven't done that yet, but I did forward the ad to Summer Madison with her economic development partnerships with the schools. I also posted it on the board at SWAC last time. We just didn't get a lot of interest. It's very, very difficult to...
Commissioner Gold?
Let me just say one thing about posting ads. It's great, but not everybody reads those ads. If someone is contacted personally, like if, say, a superintendent or one of the teachers knows an individual student that would fit into that niche.
Well, and I think last time, in fact, during the summer, Janelle Howard's son, who works for the city of Brookings, worked for Riley temporarily because she knew of the position. I had sent it to her, and so she...
I think it might be good, as schools used to have assemblies. Every now and then they'd have an assembly in one of their big auditoriums.
Yeah, they have career days.
And perhaps maybe having one of us go there and say, this is what we'd like to, you know, is anyone in the audience, you know, maybe let the principal know that we'd like to do a small presentation at these schools and say, hey, is there any kids out there that would like to get involved in surveying or, you know, whatever, and present it to an assembly. You might get some hands get raised.
Well, and actually I think rather than just superintendents, a better contact would be the principals, like the high school principals.
That's what I
that
just
would
said.
be a much better contact.
Okay. All right. So, Commissioner.
Other source, Southern Oregon Workers Investment Board has funding. Jake McClellan, Kyle Stevens, they might have some avenues there. Also, very happy to hear you're on board with and thinking hopefully we can budget for another code enforcement officer, and I have a resume that I can get you from Port Orford. So that's very good news to me also, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
So why don't we segue right into your comments?
You got your stopwatch?
I do. You're on. 3 minutes, 12 seconds.
Schedule. I will be tomorrow morning at Coos Curry Douglas Business Development. That will be about a 2-hour board meeting. Then I'm going to hustle over to Roseburg, which is the quarterly meeting of Southwest Oregon Workers Investment Board. And then I have an AOC meeting. That's very important. Salem on Friday. And that's going to be 3.5 hours. And then I got the last one, which is very important also, is back in Springfield. I think it's 2 o'clock on Friday. And that is for carbon reduction, the whole state of Oregon, how that can affect rural counties. And you know, when we follow the legislative process, it doesn't necessarily bring funds back to the county. That's got to be our #1 goal, to how we can compete and overcome on that. But this is a bill alert, bad bill alert from Representative David Brock Smith on rent controls. Horrible news. With the shortage of housing we have, the rent controls taking the incentive from people that do want to have rentals available to lower income folks, to even middle class. This just about does it in. I'd love to speak on this a little bit, the information I have, but I just encourage anyone to, if they need this, to contact me, and I'll make sure that they get the basis of this bill, because it does not help anyone. Also, with Council Huddle and Director Schmelzer, I'm going to be promoting to the board. I think we need to guard their time a little bit. People need to, this is just my opinion. I've not talked to either one of them about this. Council Huddle I did about a year ago, and he's accessible, which I appreciate, but their time is very expensive and it's very valuable, and I think at some point for people just to drop in. I saw your schedule yesterday, which you handled very well, of course, but I was, you know, I left here about 6:30. I think you left, I don't know, 8:30. Hard to say, but she was on major overload, and she signed up for that. Certainly no complaining. But I think a more structured approach and access to them is something I want the board to please consider down the road. You know, everything else away, Ferry Hole boat ramp, we need to spend some time on that. We got about 12 minutes for Roadmaster Christensen to get here. One issue that you know, I'll come back to the fires real quick here. Insurance claims in California from the fires they had just for 2018, $11.4 billion. As you know, that's $11,400 million. And so I just keep, as respectfully as I can, sounding the alarm for Oregon. And I don't want that here. And I'd love to be wrong that we're not as great a risk as I fear that we are. And then you heard the sheriff, this is my last thing, Mr. Chair, you heard the sheriff's deputy the other day report, actually the captain, the level of responsibility that they have. I was just talking to Curry Community Health CEO Ken Duque about the county being subjected to whatever those issues are, and the Oregon Health Authority on these folks that, you know, become incarcerated eventually, you know, as they do go into jail, the Oregon Health Authority walks away, and we're left with a bill. I could tell you a story, maybe another time, what happened in Douglas County. Here's $125,000 come right out of our budget. I won't give you specifics. I don't think I'm authorized to do that, but it's a for real payment that the Curry County taxpayers had to make, and the losses continue to pile up. I know I'm going to be able to count on you to help me identify these and correct them to the very best of our ability. That's all I have. Thank you.
Commissioner Gold.
I think I'm going to forego my comments for today in
the
interest of brevity here.
I have just a few comments. First, I think we just spoke on the code enforcement. We are downsizing the motor pool. We're going to be selling off a lot of the old cars, downsizing the amount of cars that we have, and the county employees that use the vehicles are going to have to learn to share. We're actually going to put a calendar up, and people can reserve cars for the future. We still have not completed, but we will be tightening in on the travel policies, and the filling out of the paperwork and all that stuff has yet to be done. But we are working forward on that. I want to commend Steve Byerlin on something in this pack of papers I have here. You may or may not know, but I will be at the NACO meetings in Washington between the 1st and the 6th of March.
Make sure everybody knows what that stands for.
National Association of Oregon.
Got you. But no, that's good for the public to know that.
Thanks for putting me on the spot.
Okay, sorry.
Anyway, I will be there for the meetings. We will be in front of a lot of senators and Congress during that time. I'm scheduled already, I think, for 13 or 14 meetings between Saturday morning and Tuesday. We're even working 14 hours on Sunday. I will be presenting to Merkley and Wyden this Rogue River fishery recovery issue that Steve Byerlin brought to the board a few weeks ago that we approved to move forward. The numbers are staggering on this. The amount of detriment to the Rogue River and the loss of fish, tourism, the local businesses and everything is amazing. I know people say, well, gee, you're probably you're shooting for the moon to ask for the kind of money. Just so you know, the ROA on this Elk Creek, I think it was, and I'm not certain on this, they got $288 million, I think it was, to recover from damage done on another dam. So this isn't, these aren't crazy numbers, and they're going to have to deal with it. These are contract violations that the Corps had with the county and with the state that they basically abandoned. We've also got some issues with fire and smoke that we're going to be meeting with some congressmen about, congresspeople about asking for some money for abatement procedures for local businesses that lost money for some of the smoke damage that occurred in Curry County over the last few years. So we do have a very busy schedule there. I'm thrilled to be part of it. And this is in association with the AOC. And I'll promise you one thing, I'll get you results when I get back. But like I've said before, I'm not afraid to knock loudly on the doors and ask. And I will be asking that the federal government realize that rural Oregon needs help. They've taken so much from us, they don't offer very much to us anymore. Rural Oregon needs to survive, and there's only one way, and that's somebody's got to reach their hand out and help us. We can't just do it all. So I will be there and doing all we can, and that's all I have.
Mr. Chair?
Not quite. This is the ordinance for advisory votes.
Okay. Yep, thanks. So at your places is being passed around the emergency ordinance to be adopted by unanimous vote at a single reading. I'll read it. It's really short and sweet. This is a matter of an amendment to the Curry County Code authorizing an advisory question to be placed on the ballot by the Board of Commissioners. The ordinance shall be known as ordinance number blank. We'll fill that in after adoption. Amending the Curry County Code with respect to general administration, Article 1, adding Division 20, an ordinance authorizing the Board of Commissioners to place advisory questions on the ballot. And then Exhibit A is the actual text of the article for adoption. Attached here to and incorporated by reference is adopted as an amendment and a new Division 20 to Article 1 of the Curry County Code. It has a severance clause saying that if any section, subsection, provision, clause, paragraph of this ordinance shall be adjudged or declared by any court of competent jurisdiction to be unconstitutional or invalid, such judgment shall not affect the validity of the remaining portions of the ordinance. And it is hereby expressly declared that every other section, subsection, provision, clause, or paragraph of this ordinance enacted, irrespective of the enactment or validity of the portion thereof declared to be unconstitutional or invalid, is valid. And then it says an emergency clause, the Board of Commissioners for Curry County deems this ordinance necessary for the immediate preservation and protection of the public peace, health, and safety and general welfare of Curry County, declares an emergency exists, and this ordinance shall be effective on, and it's essentially adoption today, dated this 20th day of February 2019. It's got signature pages, has the attesting and the approved. And then here's the meat and potatoes, Exhibit A, Section 120.010 title. This ordinance shall be known as an ordinance authorizing the Board of Commissioners to place advisory questions on the ballot. Section 1.2 2020.020, authorization to place advisory questions. The Board of County Commissioners for Curry County may, upon a majority vote, submit questions on matters of county concern to the voters of Curry County for a non-binding advisory vote at any general or primary election. And Section 1.20030, statutory compliance, questions on matter of county concern placed on the ballot for an advisory vote shall comply with all the requirements of Oregon statutes and administrative rules governing elections. And then I just request a motion to approve and adopt and a vote.
Would you come over to my house and speed read the amendments in the ORS to me, please?
Excuse me, as a member of the public, my name is David Barnes. As a member of the public, I'm opposed to this action. The idea that you needed this just came up at 11:30 this morning, barely 2.5 hours ago. The public hasn't had a chance to see this, hasn't had a chance to comment on this, and I'm highly opposed to you taking this action today. I just want to voice that concern. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The law allows the board to adopt an ordinance by emergency at a single reading by majority vote.
I do not believe that this ordinance meets the requirements of being an emergency. Something can be posted in the paper. I don't see how that affects the public safety in emergency. As I said, I'm opposed to this. I think this is bad politics. Okay, this isn't governance. This is bad politics.
Really noted.
Mr. Chair. Council Huddle sounds like that guy, that gentleman that reads at the House floor. I mean, he reads just a little bit faster than you, not much. Thanks for the work during lunch. I don't know how you have time to eat.
We have a motion?
I move that we approve this ordinance as written.
Second, Mr. Chair.
Any further discussion?
There is one typo that we'll just have to correct later.
Thank you.
Roll.
Commissioner Gold.
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce.
Yes.
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
So, Mr. Chair, this room was reserved at 2 o'clock for another meeting, and then we had that one matter of possibly revisiting the executive session material for the Roadmaster. If that's the will of the board, we can adjourn until this meeting is over and come back and hear the executive session with the Roadmaster, or we can continue that to another meeting at another. Are we having a meeting next week?
We are, and I would just recommend perhaps we just lay that over. It's not.
Okay. Yeah, it's not time sensitive. Very good.
It's 2 o'clock. This meeting's adjourned.